Hi everyone, welcome to Ahibash. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue that the fight between C from Demon Slayer's Entertainment District arc didn't just entertain millions of people. It fundamentally changed what weekly anime could achieve by proving that television animation could match movie quality while breaking viewership records that even beat the Olympics. Through Ufotable's revolutionary combination of hand-drawn and computer animation, a completely unique combat system that turns fighting into music, and storytelling that makes forced retirement feel as devastating as death. This single fight raised the bar so high that it forced the entire anime industry to reconsider what's actually possible in weekly shows. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. That's enough. Let's begin. Section 1. The night anime beat the Olympics. On February 6th, 2022, something happened in Japan that nobody expected. Demon Slayer, episode 10 of the Entertainment District arc, pulled in more viewers than the Winter Olympics opening ceremony. Let me repeat that because it sounds impossible. A cartoon about teenagers fighting demons beat one of the biggest sporting events in the world. Not by a little bit either. The numbers were clear, the data was real, and suddenly everyone had to admit that anime wasn't just some niche hobby anymore. It had become appointment television that could compete with anything on TV. This wasn't luck or a fluke. The final episode of the Entertainment District arc drew 25.97 million viewers in Japan alone. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 1 out of every 5 people in the entire country watching the same anime episode. The premiere episode months earlier had started with 10.683 million viewers, which was already massive. But as the arc continued and word spread about what was happening in those episodes, the numbers just kept climbing. By the time Tengen and Tanjiro were fighting for their lives against Gyutaro, the entire nation was watching. But the Olympics comparison is what really matters here, because it represents something bigger than just raw numbers. The Winter Olympics is an event that countries spend billions of dollars on. It's designed to capture global attention. Television networks pay enormous amounts of money for broadcasting rights because they know millions of people will tune in. These are events that feature the best athletes in the world competing at the highest level. And yet, when Japanese viewers had to choose between watching Olympic athletes or watching Tengen complete his musical score technique while fighting with one arm, they chose the anime. The marketing research company Video Research Limited tracks television ratings across Japan, and their data showed exactly what happened. During the week of January 31st to February 6th, episode 10 of Demon Slayer didn't just compete with the Olympics, it won. The episode grabbed a larger share of viewers than both the regular Olympic programming and the opening ceremony itself. This was the week when the Olympics should have been dominating every screen in the country. Instead, people were watching a poisoned Hashira with one arm deflect blood sickles while orchestral music played in the background. The Entertainment District arc didn't just win a single week. According to the same research data, Demon Slayer was the most popular show on Japanese streaming services for 18 consecutive weeks. 18 weeks straight. That's more than 4 months of being the #1 thing people wanted to watch. Not just the #1 anime, the #1 show, period. During those 18 weeks, the arc beat every drama, every reality show, every sports broadcast, and every other form of entertainment available on streaming platforms across Japan. When we look at the 2023 data, the pattern continues. The Swordsmith Village arc finale, which came after the Entertainment District arc, drew 15.4 million average viewers, with a peak of 22.8 million people watching at the same time. Video research company confirmed that this made it the most watched anime show in Japan for the entire year of 2023. It beat Detective Conan, which has been a ratings powerhouse for decades. It beat One Piece, which is one of the longest running and most beloved anime series ever made. It even beat Saze-san, a family-friendly comedy that airs in an earlier time slot designed to capture maximum viewers. The global impact was just as dramatic. On Netflix, the Entertainment District arc became the #1 most watched anime worldwide. Not in one country or one region, everywhere Netflix operates. The streaming data showed that when you compared viewing hours across all anime content on Netflix, nothing came close to Demon Slayer. People in the United States were watching it. People in Europe were watching it. People in South America, Asia, Australia, and Africa were all tuning in to see what would happen next in the Entertainment District. This global reach is important because it shows how the fight between Tengen and Gyutaro transcended language barriers. Anime had been popular internationally for years, but it usually stayed within dedicated anime fan communities. Your average person who didn't watch anime probably couldn't name more than a few shows, if any. But the Entertainment District arc changed that math. Suddenly, people who had never watched anime before were hearing about Demon Slayer from coworkers, friends, and family members. Social media was flooded with clips from the fights. Reaction videos were getting millions of views. The conversation around this arc wasn't happening in niche anime forums anymore. It was happening everywhere. Consider what this means from a business perspective. When the compilation film To the Swordsmith Village was released in theaters, combining the final 2 episodes of the Entertainment District arc with the first episode of the Swordsmith Village arc, it grossed over $60 million at the global box office. Over 30 million of that came from Japan alone, and another 15 million came from North America. These are movie theater numbers for content that people could have just waited to watch at home for free on streaming services. But they didn't wait. They paid money to see it on the big screen because the Entertainment District arc had convinced them that Demon Slayer was worth experiencing with the best possible video and sound quality. The repeat broadcasts tell another interesting story. Before the Swordsmith Village arc premiere, Japanese television aired a repeat of the final Entertainment District episode. This wasn't new content. Anyone who wanted to watch it had already seen it months earlier. Yet that repeat broadcast scored an individual rating of 7.8% and drew 9.81 million viewers. Think about that for a second. Nearly 10 million people tuned in to watch an episode they had already seen. That's the kind of viewership that major networks dream about for their new shows. And Demon Slayer was pulling those numbers for a rerun. What makes these numbers even more impressive is the competition. During the weeks when the Entertainment District arc was airing, Japan had plenty of other entertainment options. Attack on Titan was releasing its final season at the same time. That show had been considered the biggest anime in the world for years. It had millions of dedicated fans who waited years between seasons. Yet when the 2 shows went head-to-head in the ratings, Demon Slayer won. In Japan specifically, Demon Slayer's popularity had no equal. The ratings proved that the Entertainment District arc wasn't just successful. It was a cultural phenomenon that overshadowed everything else on television. The way people watched the show also changed during this arc. In previous years, most anime fans watched shows either when they aired live on TV or through streaming services later. But the Entertainment District arc created a pattern where viewers were making sure to watch episodes as soon as they became available. Social media discussions would explode within hours of each episode dropping. Spoilers would spread quickly, so fans who wanted to experience the story fresh had to keep up week by week. This created a sense of urgency and community that television executives are always trying to manufacture, but rarely achieve organically. Japanese anime viewership data from earlier surveys showed that roughly 35.15 million people in Japan watched anime regularly. When you calculate what percentage of the population that represents, you get about 37% of people aged 5 to 69. That's already a huge portion of the country. But the Entertainment District arc was reaching beyond even that established audience. The 25.97 million viewers for the finale represents a significant chunk of that total anime-watching population, all tuning in for the same show at the same time. That level of concentration is almost unheard of in modern media, where audiences are fragmented across hundreds of different options. The arc also dominated social media in ways that are hard to quantify, but impossible to ignore. Twitter would trend with Demon Slayer hashtags every Sunday when new episodes aired. YouTube reaction channels would race to get their videos up first, knowing that interest was at its peak right after the episode dropped. TikTok was flooded with edits, memes, and analysis videos. Instagram had fan art appearing within hours. This wasn't just people watching a show. This was people participating in a shared cultural experience and wanting to discuss it with others who understood what they had just witnessed. The Entertainment District arc also changed what networks were willing to spend on anime production. When executives saw the ratings and the revenue that Demon Slayer generated, it proved that investing heavily in anime quality could pay off financially. The arc showed that anime wasn't just for kids or for niche audiences. It could be primetime television that competed with anything else for viewership. This realization led to increased budgets for other anime productions and higher expectations for what anime could achieve, both artistically and commercially. The impact extended beyond just entertainment too. Academic researchers started studying Demon Slayer as a cultural phenomenon. Universities in Japan analyzed why the show resonated so strongly with audiences. Marketing professors used it as a case study in how to build and maintain audience engagement over multiple seasons. Animation programs around the world began teaching techniques used in the Entertainment District arc as examples of what's possible in modern anime production. The merchandising numbers tell another part of the story. Demon Slayer products were everywhere in Japan during and after the Entertainment District arc. Convenience stores had limited edition collaborations. Department stores dedicated entire sections to Demon Slayer merchandise. Character-themed cafes opened in major cities. This kind of widespread commercial presence doesn't happen unless a property has truly broken into mainstream consciousness. The arc didn't just have anime fans buying merchandise. It had regular consumers who saw the show trending and wanted to be part of what everyone was talking about. Looking at these numbers together paints a clear picture. The fight between Tengen and Gyutaro, along with Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke's contributions, didn't just make for entertaining television. It represented a turning point where anime proved it could compete with any form of entertainment on equal footing. The Olympics have centuries of tradition, billions in funding, and the backing of governments worldwide. Demon Slayer had a studio, a passionate creative team, and a story about teenagers fighting demons. And when viewers had to choose, millions picked the anime. This matters because it changed the conversation about what anime could be. Before the Entertainment District arc, even successful anime was often discussed as successful for anime. There was always this implicit understanding that anime was a specific niche with built-in limitations on how big it could get. The Entertainment District arc shattered that ceiling. It showed that anime could be the biggest show on television, period. No qualifiers needed. No excuses about being a niche medium, just pure dominant viewership numbers that forced everyone to recognize anime as a major player in mainstream entertainment. The success also validated years of work by studios, directors, animators, and creators who believed anime could achieve this level of cultural penetration. It proved that investing time, money, and resources into making the best possible anime wasn't just an artistic choice. It was a viable business strategy that could generate massive returns. The Entertainment District arc became proof that quality matters and that audiences will show up in enormous numbers for content that delivers on its promises. When we talk about the night anime beat the Olympics, we're really talking about the moment when anime forced mainstream culture to take it seriously. The viewership numbers were just the evidence of something bigger happening. They showed that anime had evolved from a niche interest into a cultural force that could compete with the most established forms of entertainment in the world. The fight between Tengen and Gyutaro became the proof that anime had arrived as a dominant medium, capable of capturing the attention of millions of people simultaneously across the globe. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But raw viewership numbers only tell us how many people watched. They don't explain why those millions of viewers chose to spend their time on this particular fight. They don't reveal what made the Entertainment District arc so compelling that it could beat the Olympics and dominate streaming services for months. To understand that, we need to look at what was actually happening on screen. And that story begins with animation technology that had never been seen in weekly television anime before. Section 2. Ufotable's Technical Revolution. Most weekly anime episodes are made by teams working under tight deadlines with limited budgets. Studios have to pump out an episode every single week, which means cutting corners and reusing animation whenever possible. Still frames where only mouths move. Long panning shots across backgrounds while characters talk. Fight scenes where the camera cuts away right before impact. These tricks help animators meet their deadlines, but they also mean that weekly anime usually looks noticeably cheaper than anime movies that get years of production time and bigger budgets. That's just how the industry has always worked. Until Ufotable decided to throw that rulebook out the window with the Entertainment District arc. Ufotable is the animation studio that produces Demon Slayer, and they've been around since October 2000. They're based in Shinjuku, Tokyo, and they've worked on various anime series over the years. But what they did with Demon Slayer, and specifically with the fight between Tengen and Gyutaro, represented something the anime industry had never seen before in a weekly television show. They took techniques that were usually reserved for theatrical movies with massive budgets and years of production time, then somehow made it work for episodes that aired every single week. The most important innovation Ufotable brought to this fight was their approach to combining hand-drawn animation with computer-generated graphics. Traditionally, anime studios pick one or the other. Either you draw everything by hand in the classic anime style, or you use computer graphics for certain elements like background objects or mechanical designs. When studios do mix them, the computer-generated parts usually stick out like a sore thumb. You can tell immediately which parts were drawn by hand and which were made on a computer, because they don't match. The textures look different, the movement feels off, and it breaks the visual flow of the scene. Ufotable figured out how to blend these two approaches so seamlessly that viewers couldn't tell where the hand-drawn animation ended and the computer graphics began. When Tengen swings his massive changed swords through the air, The blades themselves are hand-drawn by artists. But the explosions they create, the sparks flying off, the way debris scatters through the air, and how the camera swoops around the action are all enhanced with computer graphics. The studio layers these elements on top of each other like building a cake, with each layer adding more detail and depth to what you're seeing on screen. This layering process is called compositing, and while the technique itself isn't new, the way Ufotable uses it absolutely is. Think of it like making a sandwich. You've got your bottom piece of bread, which would be the background showing the burning buildings of the entertainment district. Then you add your lettuce and tomato, which would be the hand-drawn characters of Tengen and Gyutaro fighting. Then you add your cheese and meat, which would be all the special effects like the blood sickles flying through the air and the explosive impacts. Finally, you put the top piece of bread on, which would be the lighting effects that make everything glow and cast shadows. Each ingredient is prepared separately, but when you put them all together, you get something that tastes better than any single ingredient by itself. What makes Ufotable's version special is how much time and care they put into making sure every layer works perfectly with the others. The lighting on the hand-drawn characters matches the lighting from the computer-generated explosions. When dust and smoke from the computer graphics pass in front of the hand-drawn characters, they cast shadows and change colors exactly how they should in real life. The amount of attention to detail required to make this work is enormous, and it's why most studios don't even attempt it. Ufotable somehow made it their standard approach for every single episode. The camera movement in the Tengen vs. Gyutaro fight demonstrates another area where Ufotable pushed boundaries. In traditional hand-drawn animation, moving the camera is incredibly difficult and expensive. If you want the camera to spin around a character, you need to draw that character from dozens of different angles, with each drawing showing them from a slightly different perspective. This takes time and requires skilled artists. So most anime keeps the camera relatively static, maybe panning left to right or zooming in and out, but not doing anything too fancy. Ufotable uses computer graphics to create three-dimensional space that the camera can move through freely. This means they can have the camera whip around characters, dive between sword strikes, zoom through explosions, and follow the action from angles that would be nearly impossible to animate by hand. During the sequence where Tengen completes his musical score technique and starts deflecting all of Gyutaro's attacks, the camera spins and weaves around them like it's mounted on a roller coaster. It dives low to show Tengen's footwork, swoops high to show the wider battlefield, then crashes back down to catch a close-up of their faces as their blades collide. All of this happens in seconds, and it never feels confusing or disorienting. You always know where everyone is and what's happening, even though the camera is moving in ways that would make most viewers dizzy if done poorly. The color choices in this fight show another level of artistic thought that Ufotable brought to the production. Gyutaro's blood demon art creates sickles made of his own poisoned blood, and Ufotable made these a deep, vivid red that almost glows against the darker backgrounds. When these blood sickles fly through the air, they leave red trails behind them, like streaks of paint. Meanwhile, Tengen's sound-breathing attacks are animated in bright gold and amber colors that explode outward with turquoise accents. The contrast between Gyutaro's red and Tengen's gold creates a visual language that makes it easy to follow the fight, even when things get chaotic. Anytime you see red on screen, you know it's a demon attack. Anytime you see gold and turquoise, you know it's Tengen fighting back. This color coding extends to the environment too. The entertainment district is on fire during most of this fight, which means everything should theoretically be bathed in orange and yellow light from the flames. But Ufotable carefully controls how that firelight interacts with the characters and their attacks. When Gyutaro stands in front of burning buildings, the fire behind him makes his silhouette darker and more menacing. When Tengen lands in a patch of clear ground, the firelight makes his golden attacks shine even brighter. The studio uses the fire in the background not just as set dressing, but as an active tool to make the fight more visually interesting and easier to follow. The lighting design goes even deeper than just choosing good colors. Every source of light in a scene casts shadows, reflects off surfaces, and changes how colors appear. In the Entertainment District arc, Ufotable paid attention to all of these details. When explosions go off, they create a sudden bright flash that illuminates everything nearby for just a split second. The characters' faces light up, their eyes reflect the explosion, and even the smoke in the air briefly glows. Then the light fades, and everything returns to the dimmer firelight from the burning city. This kind of dynamic lighting is standard in big-budget movies, but almost never appears in weekly television anime because it requires too much work to do properly. Another technique Ufotable borrowed from other famous anime studios was the speeding background effect. This is where the background streaks past so fast that it becomes blurred lines rather than recognizable objects. You might have seen this in other action anime, where a character moves so fast that the world around them blurs. The studio Gainax pioneered this technique decades ago, and their successor studio, Trigger, continues to use it today. Ufotable took this idea and refined it for the Entertainment District arc, using it whenever Tengen or Gyutaro moved at speeds that should be almost impossible to see. The blurred backgrounds communicate speed and intensity without having to animate every single frame of movement, which would be prohibitively expensive and time-consuming. The smoothness of the animation itself deserves attention too. Animation works by showing you many still images in rapid succession, creating the illusion of movement. The more images you show per second, the smoother and more fluid the movement appears. Most anime operates at what's called limited animation, where they use fewer images per second and rely on holding certain frames longer or using tricks to imply movement without actually animating every single frame. This saves time and money, but can make the animation look choppy or jerky during fast action sequences. Ufotable used a much higher number of images per second for the key moments in the Tengen vs. Gyutaro fight. This meant drawing more frames of animation, which required more time and more artists. But the result was movement that flowed smoothly from one action to the next without any jerkiness or stuttering. When Tengen spins his chained swords around his body, you can see every rotation clearly. When Gyutaro's blood sickles slice through the air, the motion is so smooth and continuous that it looks almost real. This level of animation quality is expected in theatrical anime movies, but was almost unheard of in weekly television anime before Ufotable proved it could be done. The way Ufotable visualized the breathing techniques added another layer of spectacle to the fight. Sound breathing attacks explode outward with amber and turquoise colors that burst like fireworks. These aren't just pretty colors slapped on top of the animation. The explosive effects interact with the environment, sending debris flying, creating shockwaves that disturb smoke and dust, and casting colorful light on everything nearby. When Gyutaro uses his blood demon art, the red sickles cut through the air with such force that they slice clean through buildings and leave glowing red lines that hang in the air for a moment before fading. These visual representations make it clear what kind of power each character is using, without needing anyone to stop and explain it. The composition of each shot also shows Ufotable's attention to filmmaking principles. Composition means how elements are arranged within the frame you're looking at. Good composition guides your eye to what's important and creates a sense of space and depth. During the fight, Ufotable uses the burning rubble and clouds of dust not just as background elements, but as framing devices. Tengen might be shown through a gap in the smoke, drawing your eye to him. Gyutaro might emerge from behind a falling building, using the structure to hide his approach until the perfect dramatic moment. These are techniques borrowed from live-action cinematography, and they show that Ufotable thinks of anime production as filmmaking rather than just drawing moving pictures. What makes all of this even more impressive is that Ufotable maintained this quality level across multiple episodes. The fight between Tengen and Gyutaro spans from episode 8 through episode 11 of the Entertainment District arc. That's 4 full episodes of animation at a quality level that most studios struggle to achieve for a single climactic sequence. Episode 10, the one that beat the Olympics in viewership, features some of the most intensive animation in the entire arc, with the sequence of Tengen using his completed musical score technique, representing minutes of continuous, high-quality action. Animation, with no breaks for dialogue or static shots. The studio managed this by working differently than most anime productions. While many studios are forced to outsource work to other animation companies or freelance artists to meet their deadlines, Ufotable keeps most of their production in-house with their own team of artists. This gives them more control over the final product and ensures that everyone working on the show understands the vision and quality standards they're trying to achieve. It also means they can maintain visual consistency across episodes, with the same artists working on similar types of shots and effects throughout the entire arc. This in-house approach does mean Ufotable produces fewer anime series than larger studios that work on multiple shows simultaneously. While some studios might have 5 or 6 different anime productions running at the same time, Ufotable focuses on one or two projects and gives them their full attention. This quality over quantity strategy is what allowed them to pour so much time and resources into making the Entertainment District arc look as good as it does. They weren't spreading their artists thin across multiple projects. Everyone was focused on making Demon Slayer the best it could possibly be. The results speak for themselves. When the Entertainment District arc episodes were screened in theaters as part of compilation films, audiences applauded during and after the fight sequences. People who had already seen these episodes at home paid money to watch them again on a big screen with better sound systems because they wanted to experience the animation in the highest quality possible. Film critics who normally don't pay much attention to anime took notice and wrote articles analyzing Ufotable's techniques. Animation students around the world began studying these episodes to understand how Ufotable achieved what they did. Other anime studios paid attention too. After seeing the success of the Entertainment District arc, multiple studios announced they were increasing their budgets and extending their production schedules to allow for higher quality animation. The industry as a whole had to confront the reality that audiences could tell the difference between good and great animation, and they would reward shows that went the extra mile with higher viewership and more revenue. Ufotable had proven that investing heavily in animation quality wasn't just an artistic choice, but a viable business strategy. The Entertainment District arc forced a recalculation of what television anime could be. For decades, the industry operated under the assumption that theatrical quality animation was simply too expensive and time-consuming for weekly television production. Studios made peace with the fact that TV anime would always look cheaper than movies because that's just how the economics worked. Ufotable challenged that assumption and showed it wasn't necessarily true. Yes, it required more resources and better planning. Yes, it meant producing fewer total shows. But it was possible to bring movie-quality animation to television if you were willing to commit to it fully. The technology Ufotable used, the techniques they pioneered, and the quality standards they maintained didn't just make for pretty pictures on screen. They fundamentally changed what viewers expected from anime. After watching Tengen fight Gyutaro with that level of visual spectacle, audiences were less willing to accept lower-quality animation in other shows. The bar had been raised, and every studio producing action anime had to figure out how to clear it, or risk their shows feeling outdated and cheap by comparison. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But animation quality alone doesn't make a fight legendary. You can have the most beautiful visuals in the world, but if the fight itself isn't interesting or doesn't make sense, all those pretty pictures mean nothing. What made the battle between Tengen and Gyutaro truly special was the combat system driving the action. And that system was unlike anything anime had seen before. Section 3. When battle becomes music. The musical score technique. Every breathing technique in Demon Slayer has its own style and philosophy. Water breathing flows and adapts. Flame breathing burns with intensity and power. Thunder breathing strikes with overwhelming speed. But sound breathing, used exclusively by Tengen Uzui, operates on a principle that no other technique in the series uses. It turns combat into music, treating every movement, attack, and counter as if they were notes on a musical sheet that only Tengen can read and play. The technique that makes this possible is called musical score. Tengen developed this method by combining his natural talent as a shinobi warrior with his superhuman sense of hearing. While most fighters watch their opponent's movements with their eyes and react based on what they see, Tengen listens to the rhythm of how his enemies move. Every step they take, every swing of their weapon, every shift in their body weight creates a pattern. These patterns have a rhythm, and Tengen's ears are good enough to pick up on that rhythm and turn it into something he can understand, like reading sheet music. Here's how it works in practice. When Tengen first encounters an enemy, he's not just fighting them, he's listening. Every action his opponent takes gets recorded in his mind, like writing down musical notes on a page. The opponent takes 3 quick steps forward, swings their weapon twice, then jumps back. Tengen hears that pattern. He files it away. The opponent circles to the left, feints an attack, then strikes from the... Tengen adds that pattern to his mental score. Over the course of a fight, Tengen is building up a complete understanding of how his enemy moves, what they prefer to do, and what patterns they fall into when they attack or defend. The brilliant part comes after Tengen has gathered enough information. Once he's observed his opponent long enough and recorded enough of their patterns, he can complete the musical score. This is the moment where all those individual patterns connect together into one complete song that Tengen can read perfectly. After completing the musical score, Tengen knows what his opponent is going to do before they do it, because he's reading the rhythm of their movements. Like a musician, reading sheet music, knows what note comes next in a song. During episode 10 of the Entertainment District arc, we see exactly what this looks like in action. Tengen has been fighting Gyutaro for what feels like forever. He's been poisoned by Gyutaro's blood sickles. His left hand has been cut clean off. His left eye has been slashed. He's lost so much blood that Gyutaro and everyone else thinks he's dead. But Tengen used his shinobi training to stop his own heart temporarily, which slowed down the poison spreading through his body and made him appear dead long enough to complete his musical score of Gyutaro's fighting style. When Tengen returns to the fight with his musical score completed, everything changes. Gyutaro launches his Blood Demon Art attack, sending dozens of poisoned blood sickles flying through the air from multiple directions. These are the same attacks that have been overwhelming Tengen throughout the entire fight. Before completing his musical score, Tengen could barely keep up with them even when he had both hands. Now, with only one functional arm, Tengen deflects every single attack effortlessly. His sword moves with perfect timing, batting away each blood sickle right before it reaches him. The animation during this sequence shows Tengen shouting out what sounds like numbers as he fights. He's calling out the rhythm of Gyutaro's attacks as he reads them. It's like a musician counting beats in a song, staying on rhythm, and knowing exactly when each note should be played. Tengen moves his body and swings his sword in time with this rhythm, turning the fight into a deadly dance, where he knows every step his partner is going to take before they take it. What makes musical score particularly interesting is that it's not a power-up in the traditional sense. Tengen doesn't get stronger or faster after completing it. His one remaining hand doesn't suddenly heal. The poison in his body doesn't disappear. He's still fighting at a severe physical disadvantage against an upper-ranked demon who has killed 15 Hashira over the past 100 years. But musical score gives him something more valuable than raw power. It gives him perfect information. And in a fight where both sides are extremely skilled, having perfect information about what your opponent will do next is the ultimate advantage. The technique does have significant limitations though. The most important one is time. Tengen can't just start using musical score the moment a fight begins. He needs to observe his opponent long enough to build up a complete understanding of their patterns. Against Gyutaro, this took nearly the entire length of their fight. Every time Gyutaro attacked, every movement he made, every technique he used, added more information to Tengen's developing musical score. This means Tengen is fighting at a disadvantage for most of the battle, taking hits and accumulating damage while he gathers the data he needs. Another limitation is that musical score only works against opponents who have patterns to their fighting. If someone fought completely randomly, with no rhythm or repetition to their movements, musical score would be much less effective, because there wouldn't be a consistent pattern for Tengen to read and predict. Fortunately for Tengen, most fighters do develop patterns even if they don't realize it. Everyone has techniques they prefer, distances they're comfortable at, and responses they default to when pressured. Musical score exploits those natural patterns that develop in combat. Sound breathing itself, separate from the musical score technique, has its own distinct characteristics. It's derived from thunder breathing, which is the style that Zenitsu uses. Thunder breathing focuses on generating extreme speed and power through single decisive strikes, like a bolt of lightning hitting its target. Sound breathing takes that foundation, but adds explosiveness and sustained pressure rather than single strikes. Where thunder breathing is about one perfect moment, sound breathing is about maintaining intensity through continuous attacks. Tengen uses 3 specific forms of sound breathing during the fight with Gyutaro. The first form is called Roar. Tengen lifts both of his massive changed swords high above his head, then slams them down with tremendous force. The impact creates an explosion that blasts outward, damaging enemies and destroying terrain. It's a simple technique, but devastating in its directness. The fourth form is constant resounding slashes. This technique involves Tengen swinging his blades in rapid succession, creating a continuous barrage of attacks that give his opponent no time to counter or breathe. The slashes come so fast they overlap with each other, with one blade still completing its arc while the other is already beginning the next attack. This form showcases the advantage of Tengen's dual-wielding style with his chained weapons. The fifth form is string performance. For this technique, Tengen spins both of his swords simultaneously at high speed while charging forward at his enemy. The spinning blades create a wall of steel that's almost impossible to get through, while the forward momentum turns Tengen himself into a battering ram. An opponent facing string performance has to deal with both the spinning blades cutting at them and Tengen's body mass crashing into them at the same time. All three of these forms share the characteristic explosive power that defines sound breathing. Every attack creates shockwaves, sends debris flying, and generates the kind of impact that you feel in your bones. The breathing style matches Tengen's personality perfectly. He calls himself flashy and values spectacle and showmanship. Sound breathing delivers exactly that, with every technique looking and sounding like a fireworks display. Tengen's weapons are as unique as his fighting style. He wields two enormous swords that are each as big as normal Demon Slayer weapons by themselves. But these aren't just oversized swords. They're designed like cleavers, with broad, thick blades built for chopping rather than slicing. Each blade has a notch cut into the sharp end, and the two swords are connected at their handles by a long metal chain. This design allows Tengen to use them either as two separate weapons, swinging one in each hand, or as a single connected weapon where he can throw one blade and use the chain to whip it around while still controlling it with the other handle. The chain connecting his swords gives Tengen incredible range and flexibility in how he attacks. He can swing both blades in opposite directions to hit multiple enemies at once. He can throw one blade to attack at a distance while using the other to defend up close. He can spin the chain to create a defensive barrier of rotating steel. The weapon requires enormous strength just to lift and swing, let alone use effectively in combat. But Tengen makes it look effortless, thanks to his years of training as a shinobi before becoming a demon slayer. The swords themselves have explosive properties that make them even deadlier. According to the series creator, when Tengen swings these massive blades with enough strength and speed, the friction created when they hit something causes an explosive reaction. Additionally, Tengen keeps gunpowder residue on his blades, which adds to the explosive effect when the swords make contact with a target. The result is that every hit Tengen lands doesn't just cut his opponent, it explodes. Before the fight with Gyutaro, no demon had ever survived a direct hit from Tengen's swords, because the explosive impact was simply too much for their bodies to handle. Tengen also carries small black explosive beads that he uses as part of his combat strategy. These are essentially miniature bombs designed specifically for fighting demons. He can throw them like grenades, set them as traps, or use them to create diversions during battle. The explosions from these beads are strong enough to damage even upper-rank demons, and Tengen uses them creatively throughout his fights to control the battlefield and create openings for his sword attacks. The combination of musical score prediction, sound breathing techniques, explosive weapons, and miniature bombs makes Tengen one of the most tactically diverse fighters among all the Hashira. Where some Hashira rely primarily on raw strength or speed, Tengen approaches combat like a shinobi would, using every tool and trick available to gain advantages over his opponents. He's not above using flashy distraction techniques, setting traps, or relying on his 3 wives to help gather information and provide support during missions. He treats demon hunting like an intelligence operation, combined with direct combat. What makes musical score truly special in the context of anime as a whole is that it's a completely unique power system. Other anime have characters with enhanced senses. Other anime have fighters who can predict their opponent's moves through experience and skill. But treating combat as music, literally turning enemy movements into a song you can read and perform, is something that only exists in Demon Slayer, and only with Tengen's character. The series creator invented this concept specifically for Tengen, based on his background as both a shinobi and a Hashira, who values showmanship and flash. The musical score technique also perfectly captures what makes Demon Slayer's combat system interesting compared to other action anime. Characters don't just get stronger by training to hit harder or move faster. They develop unique approaches to combat that reflect their personalities and backgrounds. Tengen's musical score works because he's a trained shinobi with enhanced hearing and a love of music and rhythm. Another character couldn't just learn musical score because they wouldn't have the right combination of skills and natural abilities to make it work. This keeps the power system grounded and makes each character's abilities feel personal to them, rather than interchangeable. During the critical moments of episode 10, musical score is what allows the battle to shift from Gyutaro completely dominating to Tengen and Tanjiro having a real chance at victory. Before Tengen completes his musical score, Gyutaro is faster, stronger, and has the advantage of his poisoned attacks slowly wearing down everyone fighting him. After Tengen completes his musical score, suddenly Gyutaro can't land a hit. His blood sickles that were overwhelming the Demon Slayers just moments before are now being deflected and dodged with seeming ease. The technique doesn't win the fight by itself, but it levels the playing field enough that teamwork and determination can make the difference. The visual representation of musical score in the anime shows Ufotable's understanding of how to communicate complex ideas through animation. When Tengen declares that he's finished his musical score and can now read Gyutaro's filthy song, the animation shifts. The movements become more rhythmic and deliberate. The sound effects emphasize the musical beats of combat. The camera work follows the flow of attacks and counters, like watching a conductor lead an orchestra. Without anyone having to stop and explain exactly how musical score works, viewers understand that Tengen has figured something out that changes the entire dynamic of the fight. This brings us back to why the fight between Tengen and Gyutaro became so memorable and impactful. The animation was spectacular, yes. The viewership numbers were record-breaking, absolutely. But the fight also introduced a combat system that was creative, unique, and perfectly suited to the character using it. Musical score gave audiences something they had never seen before in anime combat, and it did so in a way that made logical sense within the rules of the Demon Slayer world. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. However, musical score's effectiveness came with a terrible price. By the time Tengen completed the technique and could fight Gyutaro on even terms, he had already accumulated injuries that would end his career as a Hashira. To understand why those injuries mattered so much, and how Tengen kept fighting despite them, we need to look at exactly what it cost him to buy the time necessary to complete his musical score. Section 4. Fighting with one arm. Stakes that actually matter. In most action anime, when the main characters get injured during a fight, one of two things usually happen. Either they power through the injury with sheer willpower and fight like nothing happened, or they receive some kind of healing or power boost that fixes the damage and makes them even stronger than before. It's become such a common pattern that audiences expect it. The hero gets beaten down, looks like they're about to lose, then suddenly finds new strength and wins anyway. The injuries that seemed so serious just minutes earlier become irrelevant to the outcome of the fight. The Entertainment District arc took the exact opposite approach with Tengen. Every injury he sustained during the fight with Gyutaro stayed with him and continued to affect how he fought for the rest of the battle. There was no magical healing, no sudden power boost that negated the damage, and no moment where he suddenly fought like he was perfectly healthy again. Instead, Tengen had to adapt his fighting style to work around injuries that would have ended most people's ability to fight at all. The first major injury came relatively early in the extended. Gyutaro managed to sever Tengen's left hand completely. Not a cut on the hand or a broken wrist that might heal eventually, but the entire hand removed from his arm. One moment Tengen was wielding both of his massive chained swords, and the next moment he was down to one functional arm, while blood poured from where his hand used to be. This is the kind of injury that would immediately end most fights in real life. Losing a hand means losing half your combat capability if you're a dual-wielding fighter like Tengen. But Tengen couldn't afford to stop fighting. Gyutaro wasn't going to pause the battle to let him recover or retreat. The demon just pressed his advantage, forcing Tengen to immediately figure out how to continue fighting effectively with only one hand. For a warrior who built his entire fighting style around using two connected swords simultaneously, this was like asking a pianist to suddenly perform a complex piece with only one hand. Everything about how Tengen moved and attacked had to change in an instant. The animation showed Tengen adapting on the fly. He started holding one of his swords in his remaining hand while gripping the other sword in his teeth by its handle. This let him still use both blades to some degree, though obviously far less effectively than when he had both hands. Swinging a sword while holding it in your teeth provides much less control and power than using your hand. Tengen couldn't perform most of his sound-breathing forms properly anymore because they required the precision and strength of both arms working together. He was forced into a much more defensive fighting style, focusing on survival rather than offense. The second major injury happened to Tengen's left eye. During one of Gyutaro's attacks, the demon's blood sickle slashed across the left side of Tengen's face, cutting deep enough to destroy his eye completely. Losing depth perception in the middle of a fight is incredibly dangerous. Humans use both eyes together to judge distances accurately. With only one eye, everything becomes harder to track. Gyutaro's attacks coming from the left side became much more difficult for Tengen to see and react to. The demon could exploit this blind spot to land hits that Tengen might have blocked or dodged if he still had vision in both eyes. Again, the series didn't let Tengen just ignore this injury. The animation continued to show blood streaming down the left side of his face throughout the rest of the fight. When the camera showed Tengen's perspective, we could see how losing the eye affected his vision and made tracking Gyutaro's movements more challenging. This wasn't just visual detail for the sake of looking dramatic. It was the anime showing us that these injuries had real consequences that continued to handicap Tengen for every second he remained in battle. The most dangerous injury, however, was the poison. Gyutaro's blood demon art creates weapons made from his own poisoned blood. Every time one of those blood sickles cut Tengen, it injected poison directly into his body. This wasn't a single dose either. Over the course of the fight, Tengen got hit multiple times, meaning multiple doses of poison entered his bloodstream. The poison's effects were immediate and severe, causing pain, weakness, and slowly shutting down his body's systems. Under normal circumstances, anyone poisoned by Gyutaro's blood dies quickly. The fact that Tengen survived even a single dose for more than a few minutes was remarkable. What makes the poison particularly cruel is that it's designed to get worse over time. As the poison blood circulates through the body, it spreads to more organs and causes increasing damage. The longer someone stays poisoned, the worse their condition becomes until their body completely shuts down. Tengen knew this. He could feel the poison spreading through his system, making his movements slower and his breathing harder with each passing moment. He was literally dying while trying to fight an upper-ranked demon who had already killed 15 Hashira over the past century. This is where Tengen's training as a shinobi before becoming a demon slayer saved his life. Shinobi, also known as ninja in popular culture, undergo training that teaches them exceptional control over their own bodies. This includes techniques that seem almost impossible, like slowing their heart rate at will or controlling which muscles tense and relax. Tengen used this training to stop his own heart temporarily. By forcing his heart to stop beating, he stopped his blood from circulating, which meant the poison couldn't spread to the rest of his body as quickly. Stopping your own heart is incredibly dangerous and would kill most people who try. The heart needs to keep beating to supply oxygen to the brain and other vital organs. Go too long without a heartbeat, and permanent brain damage or death becomes inevitable. Tengen could only maintain this state for a short time before he had to restart his heart and let his blood flow again. But those precious moments, with his heart stopped, gave him just enough time to slow the poison's spread and complete his musical score technique by observing Gyutaro's patterns while appearing to be dead. When Tengen rejoined the fight after stopping and restarting his heart, he was fighting with one hand, one eye, and poison still coursing through his veins. The poison hadn't disappeared. It was still killing him, just more slowly than before. He had bought himself time, not a cure. Every movement hurt. Every breath was harder than the last. His body was screaming at him to stop fighting and rest, but stopping meant dying and letting Gyutaro kill everyone else. So Tengen kept fighting. What makes this remarkable from a storytelling perspective is that the anime never let audiences forget about these injuries. In many action shows, characters get injured in the first part of a fight, then the camera and story kind of forget about those injuries during the climactic moments, because they would interfere with the hero looking cool and powerful. The Entertainment District arc did the opposite. The animation constantly reminded viewers that Tengen was fighting at a severe disadvantage. Blood continued pouring from his wounds. His movements were noticeably slower and more labored than at the start of the fight. When he swung his sword, you could see the effort it took him to generate force, with only one arm instead of two. The contrast with typical action anime power systems becomes very clear when you look at Tengen's situation. In series like Dragon Ball Z, when a character gets beaten down and seems about to lose, that's usually the setup for them to transform into a more powerful form that heals their injuries and makes them stronger. In series like Naruto, characters often have access to healing techniques or special powers that activate when they're near death. Even in other parts of Demon Slayer, we see Tanjiro push through injuries that should have stopped him by sheer willpower and determination. But Tengen doesn't get any of that. There's no transformation that heals his hand or eye. There's no secret reserve of power that makes the poison irrelevant. His musical score technique doesn't make him stronger or faster. It just gives him better information about Gyutaro's attack patterns. He's still fighting with one hand against an opponent using two. He's still half blind against an opponent with perfect vision. He's still dying from poison that continues to damage his body with every second that passes. The only thing that changed was his ability to predict Gyutaro's movements, and that had to be enough. This approach to handling injuries created genuine tension during the fight. When Tengen finally completed his musical score and started deflecting all of Gyutaro's attacks in episode 10, it was thrilling to watch. But viewers knew this couldn't last forever. The poison was still spreading. Tengen's body was still failing. Even with his newfound ability to read Gyutaro's patterns perfectly, he was running out of time. The fight became a race between whether Tengen and the other demon slayers could find a way to kill Gyutaro before Tengen's body completely gave out from his accumulated injuries. The realism of the injuries also added weight to Tengen's character moments during the fight. When he returned to battle after everyone thought he was dead, holding a sword in his teeth while blood streamed from his missing eye, it wasn't just visually striking. It showed his absolute determination to protect his 3 wives and his fellow demon slayers, even when his body was broken and dying. The fact that he managed to keep fighting at all under those conditions demonstrated incredible strength of will, but the anime never pretended that willpower alone was enough to overcome the physical reality of his injuries. Later in the fight, during the climactic moment when Tanjiro was attempting to behead Gyutaro, Tengen made one final sacrifice to create an opening. He allowed Gyutaro to slash his remaining eye, accepting blindness in both eyes, in exchange for cutting off Gyutaro's hand and pinning the demon in place for just a moment. This gave Tanjiro the split second he needed to complete his attack. Tengen sacrificing his vision to create an opening for his teammate shows how the injuries accumulated throughout the fight and how each one came with a strategic purpose, rather than just being damaged for the sake of looking dramatic. By the time the demons were finally defeated, Tengen was in such bad shape that he could barely move. The poison had spread throughout his entire body. He had lost one hand completely, and the vision in both eyes. Blood loss alone should have killed him several times over. The only reason he survived at all was because of Nezuko's blood demon art, which could burn away poison from people's bodies. Even with that supernatural healing removing the poison, Tengen's other injuries were permanent. His left hand never grew back. His career as a Hashira was over because he simply couldn't fight effectively anymore with his level of disability. This permanent consequence is another area where the Entertainment District arc differed from typical action anime. Usually when main characters suffer serious injuries, they either heal completely given enough time, or they receive some kind of replacement that restores their functionality. Prosthetic limbs that work as well as real ones. Magic healing that regrows lost body parts. Or training montages that show the character adapting so well to their disability that it no longer affects their fighting ability. These storytelling choices let the hero continue their journey without permanent consequences changing their capabilities. Tengen doesn't get any of those options. He retires from active duty as a Hashira because he recognizes that fighting upper-rank demons with one hand and compromised vision would get him killed and endanger anyone fighting alongside him. The Entertainment District arc was his final mission as an active Hashira. His injuries didn't just affect the fight with Gyutaro. They ended his entire career as a frontline demon hunter. That's a real consequence, with permanent impact on both the character and the story going forward. The decision to give Tengen permanent, career-ending injuries rather than killing him like Rengoku in the previous arc was brilliant from a storytelling perspective. Death had been used already as a way to show the dangers of fighting upper-rank demons. Using it again immediately in the next arc would have felt repetitive and predictable. Instead, showing a Hashira survive but be forced into retirement created a different kind of emotional impact. Tengen lived, which was a relief after watching him nearly die multiple times during the fight. But his dream of continuing as a Hashira and protecting people from demons was over, which carried its own sadness and weight. The way Tengen's injuries were handled also raised the stakes for future fights in the series. Audiences now knew that even if characters survived their battles, they might not walk away whole. Permanent damage was possible. Career-ending injuries were on the table. This made every subsequent fight feel more dangerous because victory wasn't guaranteed to leave the heroes in condition to keep fighting in future arcs. The plot armor that protects main characters in many anime felt thinner after watching what happened to Tengen. From a viewer's perspective, the constant presence of real consequences throughout the fight made every moment more engaging. When Tengen deflected Gyutaro's attacks with his completed musical score, it was impressive not just because the animation looked cool, but because we knew how much pain he was fighting through to make it happen. When Tanjiro made his final push to behead Gyutaro, we understood that Tengen had bought that opportunity with his own blood and body. The stakes felt real because the injuries were real and continued to matter right up until the very end of the battle. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. However, while Tengen fought through permanent injuries that would define the rest of his life, Tanjiro was about to experience something completely different. As he made his desperate final attack on Gyutaro, something awakened within him that would change not just this fight, but the entire future of the Demon Slayer Corps. Section 5. The Mark of the Sunbreather. There's a scar on Tanjiro's forehead that's been there since the beginning of the series. When he was young, he knocked over a pot of boiling water while trying to protect his younger brother from getting burned. The water scalded Tanjiro's forehead, leaving a permanent scar that he's carried ever since. It's been just a normal scar for the entire story up to this point, a reminder of his protective nature and willingness to get hurt to save his siblings. But during the climactic moments of episode 10, when Tanjiro made his desperate final attack on Gyutaro, that scar suddenly transformed into something completely different. The transformation happened at the absolute worst moment possible for Tanjiro. He had been fighting for what felt like hours, using the Hinokami Kagura techniques that pushed his body to its absolute limits. Unlike water breathing, which flowed naturally and didn't drain him too badly, the Hinokami Kagura always left Tanjiro feeling like his body was tearing itself apart from the inside. His muscles ached, his breathing was labored, and every movement took more effort than it should. He had already pushed himself far beyond what he should have been capable of, running on nothing but determination and the desperate need to protect everyone around him. Gyutaro had just stabbed him through the jaw with one of his poisoned blood sickles. The blade entered through the bottom of Tanjiro's chin and came out through the roof of his mouth. This is the kind of injury that would drop most people immediately into shock. The pain alone should have been enough to knock him unconscious. The poison coating the blade should have started killing him right away, and yet Tanjiro refused to stop. He kept pushing forward, trying to cut through Gyutaro's neck even with a blade piercing through his own jaw, because this was the only opening they were going to get. That's when his scar began to change. The small mark on his forehead, that had always been roughly circular, suddenly spread outward like flames climbing up wood. The pattern stretched down his forehead and wrapped around toward his eye, taking on the appearance of fire frozen in time on his skin. The mark glowed with an intensity that made it look like it was actually burning. And in that moment, with the mark fully visible on his face, Tanjiro found strength he didn't know he had. His sword, which had been struggling to cut through Gyutaro's neck, suddenly started making progress. The blade bit deeper into the demon's flesh, cutting through muscle and bone that moments before had felt impossibly tough. This wasn't just Tanjiro powering through with determination. Something fundamental had changed in his body. He had awakened what's called the Demon Slayer mark, and it's one of the most significant power developments in the entire series. The mark is rare, appearing only on the most exceptional Demon Slayers under very specific circumstances. It grants incredible abilities to those who awaken it, but it also comes with a terrible price that makes many question whether the power is worth the cost. The conditions required to awaken a Demon Slayer mark are extremely specific and difficult to achieve. A person needs to be in a life or death situation where their heart is beating faster than 200 beats per minute and their body temperature has risen above 39 degrees Celsius, which is about 102 degrees Fahrenheit. For comparison, a normal resting heart rate is between 60 and 100 beats per minute. Getting your heart up to 200 beats per minute requires either extreme physical exertion or being in such danger that your body goes into panic mode. Similarly, normal human body temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius. Getting above 39 degrees means you're running a serious fever, or your body is working so hard that it's overheating. Tanjiro met both conditions during his fight with Gyutaro. He had been using Hinokami Kagura techniques repeatedly, which always pushed his body to the breaking point. His heart was racing from fear, exhaustion, and the desperate effort of trying to survive against an upper-ranked demon. His body temperature had spiked from the intense physical activity and the burning determination driving him forward. When Gyutaro stabbed him through the jaw, it pushed Tanjiro's body into that critical zone where the mark could awaken. His system was under so much stress that something inside him broke through to a new level of capability. The abilities granted by the Demon Slayer mark are substantial. First and most obviously, the user gains enhanced strength and speed. Not enough to suddenly overpower enemies who were previously too strong, but enough to close gaps and turn near misses into successful hits. When Tanjiro's mark awakened, his sword that had been failing to cut through Gyutaro's neck suddenly had the power to slice through. His body that had been too slow and too weak found just enough extra capability to make his attacks effective. The mark also grants access to something called the Transparent World, though Tanjiro barely touched this ability during the fight with Gyutaro. The Transparent World is a way of seeing that lets users look through living things and see their internal structure. Someone using the Transparent World can see blood flowing through veins, muscles tensing before they contract, and bones moving inside bodies. This gives them the ability to predict how their opponent is about to move because they can see the internal preparations happening before the external movement occurs. It also helps them identify weak points, like where a demon might be hiding their vital organs or strengthening their body to resist attacks. Tanjiro had actually used something similar to the transparent world earlier in the arc when fighting Daki. There was a sequence where he held his breath and suddenly seemed to see things differently, allowing him to fight with unusual effectiveness. That was a preview of the transparent world ability, though it put too much strain on his body at the time because his mark hadn't fully awakened yet. Forcing the ability without the mark to support it nearly destroyed him, which is why he couldn't maintain it for more than a few moments. Another ability granted by the mark is the power to turn a Nichiren sword bright red. The normal Nichiren swords that demon slayers carry are already special because they're made from a particular ore that absorbs sunlight, which is deadly to demons. But a red Nichiren blade takes this a step further by temporarily shutting down a demon's ability to regenerate. Normally, when you cut a demon, their body heals almost instantly, unless you behead them with a Nichiren sword. A red blade prevents that healing, making every cut actually matter and forcing the demon to fight more carefully. Tanjiro's blade turning red during the final moments against Gyutaro was part of why his attack succeeded, where previous attempts had failed. All of these abilities sound incredibly valuable, and they are. The Demon Slayer mark represents a massive increase in power for anyone who awakens it, but there's a cost that makes the mark as much a curse as a blessing. The strain that the mark puts on the human body is enormous. Using it shortens a person's lifespan dramatically. According to the information revealed later in the series, every person who awakens a Demon Slayer mark and uses its power dies before reaching the age of 25. Not might die, will die. It's a guaranteed consequence of pushing the human body beyond its natural limits. This curse exists because the mark forces the body to operate at levels it was never meant to sustain. The increased heart rate, the elevated body temperature, the enhanced physical capabilities. All of this puts incredible stress on every system in the body. It's like running an engine at maximum power constantly. Eventually something breaks down, and for humans with the Demon Slayer mark, that breakdown is fatal and comes before they can reach their mid-20s. The mark grants incredible power, but steals away the user's future in exchange. The only known exception to this curse was the very first person to have a Demon Slayer mark. His name was Yoriichi Sugikuni, and he was the creator of the first breathing style that all other breathing techniques are derived from. Yoriichi was born with his mark already present on his face. He didn't awaken it through life or death combat like others. It was simply part of him from birth. The pattern of his mark looked like flames spreading across his forehead, identical to what Tanjiro's mark became when it awakened. Yoriichi managed to live past the age of 25, despite having the mark, though how he accomplished this is not fully explained. His existence proves that the curse isn't absolutely inevitable, but he seems to be a special case rather than a model that others can follow. The appearance of Tanjiro's mark was foreshadowed earlier in the series, though it was easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention. After the Mugen Train arc where Rengoku died, Tanjiro visited Rengoku's family home to deliver messages to his younger brother and father. Rengoku's father, who used to be a Hashira before retiring, looked at Tanjiro's scar and made comments that suggested he recognized it as something significant. He mentioned that Tanjiro might be chosen as a sun breather, someone who could use the original breathing technique that Yoriichi created. At the time, these comments seemed like the bitter ramblings of a depressed, retired warrior, but they were actually hinting at what was to come with Tanjiro's mark awakening. What makes Tanjiro's mark awakening particularly significant is the timing. At this point in the story, he was the first person in the current era to awaken a Demon Slayer mark. The marks had appeared during the Sengoku era, hundreds of years ago, when the most powerful Demon Slayers fought against demons using techniques developed by Yoriichi. But after that era ended, the marks disappeared for generations. Demon Slayers kept fighting and dying, but none of them awakened marks. The knowledge of what the marks were and how they worked was almost lost to history. Tanjiro's awakening brought the marks back into the world for the first time in centuries. The significance goes even deeper because of something revealed later in the series. When one person awakens a Demon Slayer mark, it becomes easier for other strong fighters nearby to awaken their own marks. The first awakening creates a sort of resonance that spreads to others who have the potential. Tanjiro awakening his mark during the fight with Gyutaro meant that other Hashira would start awakening their marks in future battles. His breakthrough created a ripple effect that would change the balance of power between the Demon Slayer Corps and the demons for all the fights that followed. During the actual moment of awakening in episode 10, the animation made it clear that something extraordinary was happening. The mark spreading across Tanjiro's face was rendered in bright, vivid colors that stood out against the darker, blood-soaked battlefield. His eyes changed slightly, taking on a more intense look. The way he moved after the mark appeared was noticeably different, more fluid and powerful than his previous exhausted struggling. The combination of visual changes, the dramatic music swelling, and the fact that his sword suddenly started cutting through Gyutaro's neck all communicated that Tanjiro had accessed something special that changed the entire situation. What's important to note is that even with the mark awakened, Tanjiro still needed help. The mark didn't make him strong enough to defeat Gyutaro by himself. It gave him the power to cut through the demon's neck, but only because Tengen was holding Gyutaro in place with his musical score technique, and had created the opening through his sacrifice. The mark made Tanjiro strong enough to capitalize on that opening, but it didn't eliminate the need for teamwork and strategy. This kept the power scaling of the series reasonable, rather than turning Tanjiro into someone who could suddenly solo upper-rank demons. Earlier in the same arc, Tanjiro had demonstrated another technique that showed his growth as a fighter. When Gyutaro was about to kill Hinatsuru, one of Tengen's 3 wives, Tanjiro managed to combine 2 different breathing techniques simultaneously. He used Hinokami Kagura for its power and water breathing for its adaptability, blending them together into a strike that was both fast enough and strong enough to save Hinatsuru. This was something that shouldn't have been possible according to the normal rules. Breathing techniques require complete focus and dedication. Mixing them should interfere with both and make the attacks weaker, not stronger. But Tanjiro's unique background and training allowed him to pull it off. He learned water breathing first as his foundation, so it had become almost instinctive for him. He discovered Hinokami Kagura later, and recognized it as something his father had practiced, giving him a personal connection to the technique. By drawing on both his thorough water breathing training and his emotional connection to Hinokami Kagura, he managed to use both at once in moments of desperate need. This combination technique wasn't something he could do casually or repeatedly. It required enormous concentration and drained him quickly. But in that critical moment against Gyutaro, it demonstrated that Tanjiro's approach to combat was evolving beyond traditional single-style fighting. The awakening of the Demon Slayer mark during the Entertainment District arc changed how audiences viewed Tanjiro's potential. Before this, he was clearly talented and determined, but he was also obviously far weaker than the Hashira, and struggled against powerful demons. The mark awakening suggested he had the potential to reach or even surpass the Hashira if he survived long enough to develop his abilities. Of course, the curse of the mark meant surviving long enough was far from guaranteed, adding a tragic element to his increased power. For viewers watching episode 10 when it first aired, the mark awakening was one of the most exciting moments in the entire arc. The combination of Tanjiro being stabbed through the jaw, refusing to give up despite the injury, his scar transforming into the flame pattern, and his sword finally cutting through Gyutaro's neck created an unforgettable sequence. The episode's title was Never Give Up, and Tanjiro's mark awakening served as the perfect embodiment of that theme. He refused to stop even when his body should have failed, and something inside him responded to that determination by unlocking new power. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But while Tanjiro discovered new abilities he didn't know he had, 2 other fighters were about to demonstrate that determination and willpower could overcome even death itself, proving that the Entertainment District arc wasn't just about Tengen and Tanjiro's heroics. Section 6. Zenitsu and Inosuke's impossible survival. When episode 9 ended, it looked like the Demon Slayers had lost. Gyutaro had just stabbed Inosuke through the chest from behind, the blade going completely through his body and coming out the front in a spray of blood. Tengen was lying on the ground with one arm severed, his heart stopped, appearing dead to everyone including Gyutaro. Zenitsu had been buried under a collapsed burning building, trapped beneath rubble and flames with no way to escape. Tanjiro was alone, exhausted, and facing 2 upper-ranked demons by himself, with no backup and no hope of victory. The situation felt completely hopeless. Episode 10 started by confirming just how bad things were. Tanjiro looked around the burning Entertainment District and saw nothing but death and destruction. Nezuko was unconscious, unable to help. Tengen wasn't breathing. Inosuke had a gaping hole in his chest where Gyutaro's blade had pierced straight through. Zenitsu was buried and probably burning to death under tons of rubble. For a few terrible moments, it seemed like Tanjiro was the only one left alive to face Gyutaro and Daki, and he was in no condition to fight either demon on his own, let alone both of them together. But the Entertainment District arc wasn't done surprising viewers. One by one, the fighters who seemed dead or defeated found ways to rejoin the battle, and their returns demonstrated that determination and willpower could overcome injuries that should have been instantly fatal. These weren't magical resurrections or power boosts that healed their wounds. Instead, both Zenitsu and Inosuke revealed abilities and traits that explained how they survived what appeared to be killing blows, and their survival made logical sense within the established rules of the... Let's start with Inosuke, because his situation looked the most dire. Gyutaro had stabbed him through the chest with a poisoned blood sickle. The blade entered from behind and came out the front, which meant it traveled through the entire width of Inosuke's torso. When someone gets stabbed through the chest like that, the blade almost always hits the heart, lungs, or other vital organs. Any one of those injuries would be fatal within minutes. Add in the poison coating Gyutaro's weapons, and Inosuke should have been dead before he hit the ground. Gyutaro certainly thought he had killed Inosuke. The demon specifically said he had aimed for the heart with a single thrust, confident that he had delivered a killing blow. There was no reason to think otherwise. The blade went through exactly where a human heart should be located. Gyutaro had killed hundreds of people over his century of existence as a demon. He knew where to stab to guarantee a quick death. So when Inosuke collapsed and stopped moving, Gyutaro dismissed him as finished and turned his attention to the remaining threats. But Inosuke wasn't dead, and the reason why reveals one of the most unusual abilities any character demonstrates in the entire series. Inosuke can move his internal organs. Not by a little bit, like shifting them slightly inside his body. He can relocate them to completely different positions. When he saw Gyutaro's attack coming and realized he couldn't dodge in time, Inosuke shifted his heart from its normal position on the left side of his chest over to the right side. So when Gyutaro's blade stabbed through where the heart should have been, it hit empty space instead. The blade still went through Inosuke's body, still caused massive damage, and still injected poison, but it missed his heart, which meant he stayed alive. This sounds impossible, and under normal circumstances it would be. Human organs are held in place by connective tissue and the structure of the body. Your heart doesn't just float freely inside your chest where you can move it around at will. But Inosuke's background explains how he developed this ability. He grew up alone in the mountains, raised by wild boars after his mother abandoned him. Without any human contact or civilization, Inosuke had to survive by adapting to his harsh environment in ways that normal people never need to develop. Part of that adaptation apparently included developing control over his body that goes beyond what most humans can achieve. The series doesn't explain exactly how Inosuke learned to move his organs, or what biological differences in his body make it possible. It's presented as just something he can do, through a combination of natural talent and the extreme survival training that came from growing up in the wilds. It's unusual enough that Gyutaro never encountered anything like it in his 100 years of killing people, which is why Inosuke's survival caught the demon completely by surprise. The organ-moving ability wasn't the only thing that saved Inosuke's life, though. He also has a natural resistance to poison that came from the same mountain upbringing. Growing up in the wild, eating whatever food he could find, and getting bitten by various insects and animals all contributed to building up his body's tolerance to different toxins. This didn't make him immune to poison. Gyutaro's poison still hurt him and made him weaker, but it didn't kill him as quickly as it would kill someone without any resistance. The combination of avoiding the heart stab and resisting the poison just enough kept Inosuke alive when he should have died. When Inosuke revealed this information to Gyutaro during the fight, the demon's reaction was perfect. Gyutaro was genuinely shocked and frustrated that his guaranteed killing technique had failed. He had believed Inosuke was dead and had stopped worrying about him. Suddenly having that supposedly dead enemy stand back up and rejoin the fight threw off Gyutaro's plans and forced him to reassess the situation. It also meant the Demon Slayers had one more fighter than Gyutaro thought, which would prove critical during the final sequence. Now let's talk about Zenitsu, whose survival required a different kind of remarkable ability. Unlike Inosuke, who got stabbed but avoided vital organ damage, Zenitsu's problem was that he was buried under a collapsed building that was actively on fire. Tons of wood, stone, and other debris had fallen on top of him, pinning him down under crushing weight. The fire was spreading through the rubble, filling the space with smoke that would suffocate him even if the flames didn't burn him to death first. He was trapped with no obvious way to escape. Zenitsu managed to free himself using a thunder-breathing technique called Thunderclap and Flash Godlike Speed. This is an enhanced version of his signature move that takes the already incredible speed of Thunderclap and Flash and pushes it even further. When Zenitsu activated this technique, he moved so fast that he essentially exploded out from under the rubble before it could hold him down. The burst of speed was so intense that it looked like lightning striking upward through the collapsed building, scattering debris in all directions. But this technique came with a serious cost. Using godlike speed puts enormous strain on the user's legs. The muscles, tendons, and bones have to handle forces they weren't designed to withstand. After using godlike speed once, Zenitsu's legs were so damaged that he could barely walk. The technique essentially broke his legs from the inside through sheer overuse. And yet, he could use it a second time if absolutely necessary, though doing so would guarantee that his legs would be completely destroyed and unable to function anymore. This limitation is important because it meant Zenitsu had to be incredibly careful about when and how he used godlike speed. He couldn't just spam the technique repeatedly to solve every problem. Each use was a precious resource that cost him future mobility. During the climactic moments of the fight, Zenitsu used godlike speed once to escape the rubble, which already left his legs badly damaged. When he used it a second time to intercept Daki and prevent her from interfering with Tanjiro's attack on Gyutaro, he was spending the last bit of functionality his legs had left. What makes Zenitsu's contribution particularly important is that he's normally a very frightened, anxious character who spends much of his time complaining and crying about how scary everything is. His most reliable fighting state is when he falls asleep, because then his subconscious takes over and he fights with incredible skill and bravery that his conscious mind can't match. During the Entertainment District arc, we saw both versions of Zenitsu. When he was awake and aware, he struggled with fear and self-doubt. But when he fell asleep or entered his fighting state, he became a completely different person who could pull off incredible feats. The sequence where Zenitsu broke out from under the rubble showed him transitioning into his fighting mode. The pain, the heat, the smoke, and the desperate situation triggered his instinct to survive and protect his friends. Even though his conscious mind might have been panicking, his body and fighting spirit took over and did what needed to be done. He used godlike speed despite knowing it would cripple his legs, because the alternative was staying buried and letting everyone die. That kind of sacrifice demonstrates real growth for a character who started the series barely able to fight at all when he was conscious. The thunder-breathing style that Zenitsu uses is all about generating extreme speed and power through quick, decisive strikes. It's derived from the same foundation as Tengen's sound breathing, which explains why both styles emphasize speed and explosive force. But where Tengen uses sustained pressure and continuous attacks, Zenitsu's thunder breathing is about perfect single moments. It's like the difference between a drummer keeping a steady beat and a guitarist hitting one perfect power chord. Both are effective, but they accomplish different things. What's particularly interesting about Zenitsu is that he only knows one form of thunder breathing. Most Demon Slayers learn multiple forms of their chosen breathing style, giving them different techniques for different situations. Zenitsu only learned the first form, Thunderclap and Flash. His teacher tried to teach him the other forms, but Zenitsu struggled to master them and eventually gave up. So instead of knowing many techniques at an average level, Zenitsu perfected the one technique he could do well. He practiced Thunderclap and Flash over and over until he could perform it better than anyone else in the world. That dedication to mastering a single technique is what made godlike speed possible. It's a variation of Thunderclap and Flash that Zenitsu developed by pushing the base technique to its absolute limits. Instead of being limited by only knowing one form, Zenitsu turned his limitation into a strength by becoming the absolute best at that. During the Entertainment District arc, we saw him use Thunderclap and Flash multiple times in rapid succession, changing directions in midair and bouncing around the battlefield like a lightning bolt ricocheting off surfaces. This showed growth from earlier in the series, when he could only use the technique once before needing time to recover. The combination of Inosuke surviving the chest stab and Zenitsu escaping the rubble meant that the final push against Gyutaro and Daki had 4 fighters instead of just Tanjiro alone. This was crucial because the strategy to defeat the demons required beheading both of them at exactly the same time. Tanjiro and Tengen focused on Gyutaro, while Zenitsu and Inosuke handled Daki. If any one of those 4 fighters had actually died like it appeared they had, the simultaneous beheading strategy would have been impossible to execute. Both Zenitsu and Inosuke demonstrated growth beyond just their combat abilities during this arc. Inosuke, who normally fights with pure instinct and aggression like the wild boar that raised him, showed tactical thinking by working together with Zenitsu instead of just charging in recklessly. Zenitsu, who normally needs to be unconscious to fight effectively, managed to push through his fear while awake because the stakes were too high and his friends needed him. These character developments were as important as their combat contributions. The way the anime portrayed their returns to battle made maximum impact. When Inosuke stood back up with blood pouring from his chest wound and explained how he moved his organs, Gyutaro's face showed genuine shock. The demon had been so confident in his killing blow, and having it fail shook his composure. When Zenitsu exploded out from under the rubble in a burst of lightning, it looked like a thunderstorm had erupted on the battlefield. Both moments were animated with the same spectacular quality that made the entire Entertainment District arc visually stunning. The injuries both characters sustained were also portrayed realistically throughout the rest of the fight. Inosuke had a hole in his chest that kept bleeding. He moved more slowly than usual because of the pain and damage. Zenitsu's legs were visibly struggling to support him after using godlike speed. Neither character magically recovered just because they survived their initial injuries. The damage stayed with them and continued to affect their performance, just like with Tengen's missing hand and eye. This consistent attention to showing how injuries matter is one of the things that made the Entertainment District arc stand out. Other action anime often have characters take brutal hits and then fight like nothing happened a few minutes later. The Entertainment District arc never did that. Every injury accumulated and added to the overall damage each character was carrying. By the time they reached the final simultaneous beheading sequence, all four fighters were barely holding together through sheer willpower and desperation. The teamwork aspect of having four damaged fighters work together to pull off a complex strategy also demonstrated something important about Demon Slayer's combat philosophy. Raw power isn't enough to win. Even with Tanjiro's Demon Slayer mark awakening and Tengen's completed musical score, they still needed Zenitsu and Inosuke's help to actually defeat Gyutaro and Daki. The series consistently emphasizes that cooperation and strategy matter as much as individual strength. The strongest Demon Slayer fighting alone would lose to weaker demons working together, and the same principle applies in reverse. What Zenitsu and Inosuke accomplished by surviving and returning to the fight validated their presence as members of Tanjiro's team. Earlier in the series, both characters could seem like comic relief who were around mostly for humor and supporting Tanjiro's journey. The Entertainment District arc proved they were legitimate fighters, capable of making critical contributions when everything was on the line. Their survival and return weren't just lucky breaks. They were the result of unique abilities and personal growth that let them overcome injuries that should have ended them. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. However, surviving these injuries was only the first step. Now they had to use their damaged bodies to execute a strategy that required perfect timing and coordination. And to understand why that strategy was necessary, we need to look at exactly who they were fighting and why these particular demons were so dangerous that they had survived for over 100 years without any Hashira managing to kill them. Section 7. Upper Rank 6. The Demons Born from Tragedy. Most demons in Demon Slayer are portrayed as evil creatures that need to be destroyed to protect humanity. They kill people, they spread terror, and they serve the main villain, Muzan. The story doesn't usually ask us to feel sorry for them or understand their perspective. They're the enemy, plain and simple. But Gyutaro and Daki are different. Their backstory reveals that they weren't always monsters who enjoyed killing. They were victims who became demons because the world treated them so cruelly that death and transformation seemed like the only escape from their suffering. Gyutaro and Daki were born as humans in the Yoshiwara Entertainment District over 100 years before the events of the series. But they weren't born into the glamorous side of the district that we see with its beautiful buildings and wealthy customers. They came from the absolute poorest part of Yoshiwara, the lowest level of society where people struggled just to survive each day. Their mother was a prostitute who didn't want children and made no effort to hide her resentment toward them. Their father was never mentioned and probably abandoned the family or never knew they existed in the first place. Gyutaro was born with an appearance that people found disturbing and ugly. His skin had an unhealthy color, his body was thin and weak-looking, and his face didn't match what society considered attractive. This might not seem like a big problem in most places, but Yoshiwara was an entertainment district where physical beauty determined a person's entire worth. Beautiful people became successful entertainers who lived comfortable lives. Ugly people were treated as trash, given the worst jobs, and regarded as less than human. Gyutaro fell into that second category from the moment he was born. As a child, Gyutaro was beaten, insulted, and abused constantly. Other children threw rocks at him and called him monster. Adults treated him like he was diseased or cursed just for existing. Nobody wanted to be near him, talk to him, or acknowledge that he was a person with feelings. He grew up believing he was worthless because that's what everyone around him told him every single day. The only times people paid attention to Gyutaro were when they wanted someone to blame or hurt for their own amusement. His younger sister was completely different. She was born beautiful, with striking features that caught everyone's attention. Even as a small child, people recognized that she would grow up to be exceptional looking. In the hierarchy of the entertainment district, this meant she had value, where Gyutaro had none. Their mother named her Ume, and unlike how she treated Gyutaro, she actually paid attention to his sister because the girl represented potential income for the family. Gyutaro loved his sister with an intensity that came from her being the only person in the world who didn't treat him like garbage. She was the only one who looked at him without disgust or hatred. As they grew up, Gyutaro did everything he could to protect Ume and make sure she had opportunities he never had. He took on dangerous work as a debt collector, beating up people who owed money to various businesses in the district. It was violent, brutal work that matched what society expected from someone with his appearance. But it paid enough to keep Ume fed and clothed. Ume grew up to become one of the most successful and beautiful courtesans in the entire entertainment district. She took the professional name Daki and rose to the highest rank of Oiran, which was the most prestigious position a courtesan could achieve. Everything seemed to be working out despite their horrible childhood. Gyutaro's hard work and sacrifice had given his sister the chance to escape their poverty and build a better life. She was successful, respected, and admired by everyone who saw her. Then, disaster struck, because of something that wasn't even Ume's fault. A samurai became violent and abusive toward her during a visit. The exact details of what happened aren't fully explained, but the samurai hurt Ume badly. When Gyutaro was away and couldn't protect her, the samurai and the owner of the establishment where Ume worked decided to punish her for whatever happened during the incident. Their punishment was to burn her alive. They tied her up and set her on fire, leaving her to die in agony. Gyutaro returned home to find his sister barely alive, her body horribly burned, in unimaginable pain. The rage and grief that consumed him in that moment broke something fundamental in his mind. He had spent his entire life being treated like trash, accepting abuse and hatred, working terrible jobs just to give his sister a chance at a better life. And now these people had destroyed her for no reason other than cruelty and the fact that they could get away with it because she came from the poorest part of the district. Gyutaro killed the samurai who had hurt his sister. He killed the owner of the establishment who had allowed and participated in burning her. He may have killed others who were involved. The exact number doesn't matter as much as what his actions represented. Gyutaro had finally stopped accepting the abuse. He had fought back against a society that had tormented him and his sister their entire lives. But fighting back as a human meant he would be hunted down and executed for murder, even though he was avenging his sister who had been burned alive. That's when a demon found them. His name was Doma, and at that time he held the position of upper rank 6 among Muzan's most powerful demons. Doma discovered Gyutaro holding his dying sister in the aftermath of the violence. Instead of killing them or ignoring them, Doma made an offer. He could transform both siblings into demons, giving them the power to survive and take revenge on everyone who had ever hurt them. The alternative was for Ume to die from her burns, while Gyutaro would be executed for his crimes. Gyutaro accepted the offer. He and his sister became demons together, transforming their human bodies into something supernatural that could heal from any injury and possessed incredible strength and powers. But the transformation also changed who they were as people. Their pain, rage, and resentment from their human lives became magnified and twisted. The jealousy Gyutaro felt toward people who were born beautiful and privileged turned into pure hatred. The suffering they had endured became justification in their minds for making others suffer. Over the next century, Gyutaro and Daki killed and ate hundreds, possibly thousands of people. They specifically targeted people who reminded them of those who had hurt them when they were human. Beautiful people, wealthy people, privileged people, anyone who represented what they could never have became prey. The two of them shared the position of upper rank 6, which made them the weakest of the upper rank demons, but still far more powerful than any normal demon. What made them particularly dangerous was how they worked together. Daki operated openly as a courtesan within the entertainment district, maintaining a human disguise that let her walk among people without suspicion. She used her obi sashes, the decorative belts worn with traditional clothing, as weapons that could slice through buildings and capture victims. Gyutaro stayed hidden inside Daki's body, only emerging when she was in serious danger, or when they needed his full power to kill particularly strong enemies. This partnership meant that anyone fighting them had to deal with what seemed like two separate demons with different fighting styles and ability. Daki attacked with her obi sashes from a distance, creating a web of fabric blades that could cut through almost anything. Gyutaro fought up close with poisoned blood sickles that he could generate from his own body, slashing with overwhelming speed and covering his attacks with deadly poison. Together, they could pressure opponents from multiple angles simultaneously, making it nearly impossible to defend against both at once. The siblings had killed 7 Hashira that Daki could remember, though there may have been more she forgot about. Gyutaro claimed to have killed 15 Hashira personally. That meant at least 22 of the most elite demon slayers in history had died fighting these two over the past century. For context, there are only 9 Hashira positions in the Demon Slayer Corps at any given time. Gyutaro and Daki had killed more than twice that number over the years they had been demons. Any Hashira who encountered them was more likely to die than to survive, let alone actually win the fight. The reason for their incredible survival rate was the nature of their existence as demons. Unlike every other demon in the series, Gyutaro and Daki shared their life between 2 bodies. Killing just one of them wasn't enough. Even if you completely beheaded Daki with a Nichirin sword in the standard way demons are killed, she wouldn't die as long as Gyutaro was still alive inside her body. Beheading Gyutaro alone wouldn't work because Daki's body would keep them both alive. The only way to actually kill them was to behead both siblings at exactly the same time. This requirement made defeating them almost impossible in practice. First, you had to figure out that both needed to be beheaded simultaneously, which most demon slayers probably never realized before they died. Second, you needed enough skilled fighters to pressure both siblings at once. Third, you needed to coordinate a simultaneous beheading while fighting 2 upper-rank demons who are actively trying to kill. The difficulty of accomplishing all 3 of these things explained why Gyutaro and Daki survived for over 100 years, despite many Hashira attempting to kill them. What makes their story tragic, rather than simply evil, is that they were created by the cruelty of human society. Gyutaro didn't choose to be born ugly in a place where appearance determined worth. Hume didn't choose to be burned alive for something that wasn't her fault. They were victims who were pushed so far past any reasonable limit that becoming demons and taking revenge on the world felt justified to them. This series doesn't excuse their actions, or suggest that killing innocent people was acceptable. But it does ask viewers to understand how they became monsters, and to recognize the humanity they lost when society treated them as less than human. During the fight with Tengen, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke, Gyutaro repeatedly showed that his resentment toward privileged people still drove everything he did. When he discovered that Tengen had 3 wives who loved him, Gyutaro became enraged with jealousy. When he saw Tanjiro trying to protect his sister, it reminded Gyutaro of his own failure to protect Ume when she was burned. These emotional reactions revealed that despite being a demon for over a century, Gyutaro was still the abused child who grew up believing the world hated him for existing. Daki showed similar patterns of behavior rooted in her human trauma. She demanded constant validation and praise, throwing tantrums when people didn't acknowledge her beauty or strength. This need for recognition came from her human life, where being beautiful was the only thing that gave her value. As a demon, she clung to that identity, even though it was built on the same shallow values that had caused so much suffering in her human life. The final moments of their existence, after being beheaded, showed the siblings arguing with each other about whose fault it was that they lost. Daki blamed Gyutaro for being weak. Gyutaro blamed Daki for being careless. Their heads lay on the ground, yelling at each other in anger and resentment. But then Gyutaro's memories of their human life came flooding back. He remembered carrying his sister on his back when they were children. He remembered promising to always protect her. And he realized that even in death, his only wish was to be with her and make sure she wasn't alone. The emotional weight of their backstory and final moments made them 2 of the most memorable villains in the entire series. They weren't just obstacles for the heroes to overcome. They were real characters with understandable motivations born from genuine suffering. Defeating them didn't feel triumphant. It felt sad because you understood they had been broken people who never got the chance to heal or find peace until death finally released them. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But understanding their tragedy didn't change the fact that they had to be stopped. The strategy required to defeat them would demand perfect coordination from 4 severely injured fighters attempting something that had never been successfully accomplished in over a century. And the sequence showing how they pulled it off would become one of the most spectacular pieces of action choreography ever animated. Section 8. The simultaneous beheading. Choreography as storytelling. The challenge facing the Demon Slayers was clear, but seemed impossible to achieve. Both Gyutaro and Daki had to be beheaded at exactly the same time. Not within a few seconds of each other, at the exact same moment. If one head came off even a split second before the other, the demons would regenerate, and the opportunity would be lost. This meant coordinating 4 severely injured fighters, splitting them into 2 teams, having each team successfully behead an upper-ranked demon, and timing both beheadings to happen simultaneously while both demons were actively trying to kill them. The plan split the fighters based on their current capabilities and positions on the battlefield. Tengen and Tanjiro would focus on Gyutaro, who was the stronger and more dangerous of the 2 siblings. Zenitsu and Inosuke would handle Daki, who was powerful but less experienced and skilled than her brother. This division made sense because Tengen was the only one with enough raw power and skill to match Gyutaro directly, while Tanjiro could support him and look for openings. Meanwhile, Zenitsu and Inosuke working together had proven they could pressure Daki effectively when they coordinated their attacks. But having a plan and executing it are 2 completely different things, especially when everyone involved was barely able to stand. Tengen was missing his left hand and fighting with poison spreading through his body. Tanjiro was exhausted from repeatedly using Hinokami Kagura techniques that pushed his body past its limits. Zenitsu's legs were badly damaged from using godlike speed to escape the rubble. Inosuke had a hole in his chest from being stabbed through the torso. None of them were in any condition for extended combat, which meant they had one chance to make this work before their bodies gave out completely. The sequence that followed is one of the most carefully constructed action scenes in modern anime. Every movement, every attack, and every decision by each character served a specific purpose in building toward the simultaneous beheading. The animation tracked all 4 fighters and both demons across the battlefield, making sure viewers always understood where everyone was positioned and what they were trying to accomplish. Despite the chaos of having 6 combatants all fighting at once, the action never became confusing or hard to follow. Tengen and Tanjiro's fight against Gyutaro showed the Sound Hashira fully utilizing his completed musical score technique. With his ability to read Gyutaro's attack patterns like musical notes, Tengen could deflect the demon's poisoned blood sickles with precision, even though he only had one functional arm. Every time Gyutaro launched an attack, Tengen's sword was already moving to intercept it before the blood sickle even got close. The musical score gave him perfect timing, letting him defend himself and Tanjiro while they looked for an opening to strike at Gyutaro's neck. But Gyutaro wasn't stupid, and he quickly realized that something had changed about how Tengen was fighting. The Hashira who had been struggling to keep up with his attacks was now deflecting everything effortlessly. Gyutaro understood he was being read somehow, that his patterns had been figured out, so he started varying his attacks more, trying to break whatever system Tengen was using. He mixed up his timing, changed his angles, and added feints to his assault. This forced Tengen to work harder to maintain his musical score reading, putting more strain on his already failing body. Meanwhile, the critical moment for creating an opening came from an unexpected source. Hinatsuru, one of Tengen's 3 wives, had been providing support from a distance throughout the fight. She was a trained kunoichi, a female shinobi, just like her husband had been a shinobi before becoming a demon slayer. This training meant she knew how to use various weapons and tactics beyond just swinging a sword. Hidden in her supplies were kunai, which are small throwing knives, that had been treated with wisteria poison. Wisteria is a plant that demons find extremely toxic. Even brief contact with wisteria can weaken demons, slow their regeneration, and cause them significant pain. Demon slayers use wisteria in various ways to gain advantages in fights. Hinatsuru had prepared kunai coated with concentrated wisteria extract, specifically for fighting demons. At a critical moment during the battle, she threw several of these poisoned kunai at Gyutaro, hitting him in multiple places including his neck and legs. The wisteria poison didn't kill Gyutaro or stop him from fighting, but it did slow him down significantly for a few precious seconds. His movements became sluggish, his regeneration slowed, his attacks lost some of their usual speed and power. This created the first real opening that Tengen and Tanjiro had gotten throughout the entire extended fight. Both of them immediately tried to capitalize on it, charging at Gyutaro with the intention of beheading him while the wisteria poison was still affecting his body. Gyutaro managed to neutralize the wisteria poison through sheer willpower and demon resilience, but not before Tengen and Tanjiro reached him. The demon fought back desperately, knowing he was in real danger for the first time in the battle. During this exchange, Gyutaro grabbed Hinatsuru with his blood sickles, pulling her toward him with the clear intention of killing her as punishment for the wisteria attack, and to distract Tengen by threatening someone he loved. This was when Tanjiro pulled off something extraordinary. He combined two different breathing techniques simultaneously, using Hinokami Kagura for its explosive power and water breathing for its fluid adaptability. The combination technique let him move with the speed and force of Hinokami Kagura, while maintaining the flexibility to change direction mid-attack, like water breathing allows. He used this combined technique to close the distance to Hinatsuru faster than Gyutaro expected, and cut through the blood sickles holding her, saving her life. Tengen took advantage of Gyutaro's momentary distraction to press their attack on the demon's neck. For a brief moment, it looked like they might actually succeed in beheading him, but Gyutaro recovered and stopped their blades, then unleashed another wave of his flying blood sickles attack. The poisoned blood weapons exploded outward in all directions, forcing everyone to either dodge or take serious hits. Tengen grabbed Gyutaro and threw himself away from Tanjiro and Hinatsuru, taking the demon with him to protect the others from the worst of the blood sickle storm. This separated Tengen and Gyutaro from everyone else on the battlefield. The two of them crashed through buildings and fought across rooftops, their battle moving at incredible speed as they exchanged blows. Tengen's musical score technique allowed him to match Gyutaro's speed, despite having only one arm and being poisoned. The animation during this sequence was particularly spectacular, with the camera following their movements as they clashed repeatedly, each exchange lasting only fractions of a second before they separated and came together again. On the other side of the battlefield, Zenitsu and Inosuke were having their own desperate struggle with Daki. The female demon was using her obi sashes to attack from multiple angles at once, creating a web of slicing fabric that was difficult to get through. Zenitsu's thunder breathing let him move fast enough to dodge most of her attacks, while Inosuke's beast breathing gave him the instinct and flexibility to slip through gaps in her assault. Working together, they managed to keep Daki busy and prevent her from helping her brother fight Tengen and Tanjiro. The plan required them to not just keep Daki busy, but to actually behead her at the same moment Gyutaro was beheaded. This meant they needed to get her head off while she was actively fighting them, which was far easier said than done. Daki had over a century of combat experience, and had killed multiple Hashira throughout her existence as a demon. Zenitsu and Inosuke were talented, but still relatively inexperienced compared to Hashira-level fighters. They were punching above their weight class, and they knew it. Inosuke managed to grab Daki's head during a moment when her attention was divided. He cut through her neck and ran away with her head, trying to keep it separated from her body because that would weaken her, even though it wouldn't kill her due to her connection with Gyutaro. This forced Daki to chase after Inosuke to retrieve her head, while Zenitsu provided interference. But then Gyutaro appeared, having sensed his sister was in danger, and stabbed Inosuke through the chest in the moment that seemed to end the fight back in episode 9. We already covered how Inosuke survived that attack, and how the fight continued after everyone thought it was over. But what matters for understanding the choreography is how the sequence built up through multiple attempts and failures, before finally succeeding. The Demon Slayers tried to behead Gyutaro and Daki several times throughout the extended battle. Each attempt failed because they couldn't coordinate the timing properly, or because one of the demons escaped at the last second. These failures created tension because viewers could see the strategy was sound, but incredibly difficult to execute. The actual successful beheading sequence happened after Tanjiro managed to stab Gyutaro with the wisteria kunai that he had concealed while pretending to throw random debris at the demon. The kunai lodged in Gyutaro's leg, and the wisteria poison paralyzed him just long enough for Tanjiro to reach his neck with his sword. Gyutaro stabbed Tanjiro through the jaw to stop him, but Tanjiro's Demon Slayer mark awakened at that exact moment, giving him the extra strength needed to push through the pain and keep cutting. Tengen saw his chance and sacrificed his remaining eye. He let Gyutaro slash across his face, destroying his left eye, in exchange for cutting off Gyutaro's hand and pinning the demon in place. With Gyutaro temporarily unable to move and Tanjiro's mark-enhanced strength cutting into his neck, the demon was in serious trouble for the first time. But beheading him alone still wouldn't work. Daki had to be beheaded at the same time. Daki saw her brother in danger and tried to rush over to interfere and save him. This was when Zenitsu used his second and final godlike speed technique. Even though it would destroy his legs completely, he had to stop Daki from reaching Gyutaro. The burst of lightning speed put him directly in Daki's path, and he attacked her with such force that she was knocked back and her neck was nearly severed. She was right on the verge of being beheaded, but not quite there yet. That's when Inosuke, who everyone thought was dead from the chest stab, suddenly joined the fight again. He revealed that he had survived by moving his internal organs and rushed at Daki with his twin sword. Together with Zenitsu, they completed the cut through Daki's neck. At that exact same moment, Tanjiro's blade finished cutting through Gyutaro's neck. Both heads separated from their bodies simultaneously, rolling away from each other across the burning ruins of the entertainment district. The choreography of this sequence was remarkable because it had to track so many moving pieces and bring them all together at the exact right moment. The animation made it clear that the timing was perfect, not through luck, but through the desperate efforts of 4 fighters who pushed their broken bodies to accomplish something that should have been impossible. Every injury, every sacrifice, and every ounce of willpower had led to this single moment where both demons were finally vulnerable at the same time. The camera work during the beheading sequence showed all 4 demon slayers and both demons in quick cuts that established where everyone was and what they were doing. First, we saw Tengen pinning Gyutaro and Tanjiro cutting through his neck. Then we saw Zenitsu stopping Daki and Inosuke joining to complete her beheading. Then back to show both heads separating from bodies at the same instant. The editing made it crystal clear that the simultaneous beheading requirement had been met, despite all the chaos and difficulty involved. For a moment, it seems like victory had been achieved. Both demons had been beheaded successfully. The 4 fighters collapsed from exhaustion, relief, and their accumulated injuries. Tanjiro could barely breathe. Tengen was blind and dying from poison. Zenitsu's legs had given out completely. Inosuke was bleeding heavily from his chest wound, but they had done it. They had killed Upper Rank 6 through teamwork and determination, something that Hashira before them had failed to accomplish for over a century. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. However, the fight wasn't actually over yet. As Tengen tried to warn everyone to get away from Gyutaro's body, the demon's corpse began to do something that would threaten to kill them all, even in death, turning their victory into a potential disaster that required one more miracle to survive. Section 9. The Blood Blade Explosion. Consequences. Even in victory. The moment both demon heads hit the ground should have been the end of the fight. Gyutaro and Daki had been beheaded simultaneously, meeting the requirement to actually kill. The 4 demon slayers collapsed from exhaustion and relief, barely able to move after pushing their broken bodies to the absolute limit. Tanjiro lay on the ground, struggling to breathe, poison burning through his system. Zenitsu's legs had completely given out. Inosuke was bleeding heavily from the hole in his chest. Tengen was blind in both eyes and dying from the poison that had been spreading through his body throughout the entire battle. For just a moment, they thought it was over. They had accomplished something that no group of demon slayers had managed in over a century. Upper Rank 6 was defeated. The mission was complete. They had survived when everything suggested they should have died. The relief must have felt overwhelming, knowing that they could finally stop fighting and rest while their injuries were treated. But Tengen, with all his experience as both a shinobi and a Hashira, recognized danger that the others were too exhausted to notice. Gyutaro's headless body was still standing. Most demons collapse immediately after being beheaded, because the Nichiren sword cuts are designed to kill them instantly. But Gyutaro's body remained upright, and something was happening to it. Energy was building inside the corpse, gathering for one final attack, even though the demon's head had been separated, and he should have been dead. Tengen started yelling at everyone to run, to get away from Gyutaro's body as fast as they. But Tanjiro couldn't move. The poison from where Gyutaro had stabbed him through the jaw was shutting down his body. He was lying on the ground trying to breathe, and even that simple action was becoming impossible. His lungs wouldn't fill with air properly. His muscles wouldn't respond to his commands. The world was starting to go dark around the edges of his vision. He heard Tengen screaming warnings, but couldn't process what they meant, or force his body to react. Then Gyutaro's body exploded. Not a normal explosion like fire and smoke. His corpse released every bit of his blood demon art in one massive final attack. Hundreds, maybe thousands of poisoned blood sickles erupted outward in all directions, creating a storm of deadly blades that tore through everything nearby. Buildings that were still standing got shredded to pieces. The ground was torn up. Everything within range of the explosion was destroyed by the wave of blood weapons spreading out from Gyutaro's. The Demon Slayers had no way to defend themselves. They were too injured, too exhausted, and too close to the explosion to dodge or block. The blood sickles tore through the area where they were lying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Tengen, despite being blind and poisoned, tried to shield people with his body. But one person can't protect multiple others from an attack coming from every direction at once. The episode ended on this cliffhanger, with the explosion consuming everything, and the fate of all 4 fighters completely unknown. Episode 11 opened by showing the aftermath of Gyutaro's final attack. The entertainment district, which had already been badly damaged by the extended fight, was now almost completely destroyed. Buildings had been reduced to rubble. Fire was spreading through what remained of the structures. The beautiful district that had been full of lights and activity at the start of the arc was now a smoking ruin that looked like a war zone. The destruction was total and devastating. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Tengen had all survived the explosion, but barely. They were lying in the wreckage, unable to move, barely breathing. The poison from Gyutaro's attacks throughout the fight had been bad enough when it was just the doses from getting hit during combat. But the final explosion had exposed all of them to even more poison. Their bodies were shutting down, dying slowly but inevitably unless something changed. Tanjiro was in the worst condition. He had been fighting longer than Zenitsu and Inosuke, using techniques that damaged his own body even without the demon's attacks. The stab through his jaw had injected poison directly into his head and neck area, close to his brain. He couldn't breathe properly. His consciousness was fading. Every second that passed brought him closer to death, and there was nothing he could do about it. He had given everything he had to help defeat the demons, and now his reward was dying in the ruins, while poison destroyed his body from the inside. Tengen wasn't much better off. He had been fighting poison for the longest time out of everyone. Despite using his shinobi training to slow the poison's spread by stopping his heart, the toxin had still been circulating through his system for an extended period. Add in the blood loss from losing his hand, the damage to both eyes, and the exposure to the final explosion, and Tengen should have been dead already. The only reason he was still breathing at all was his incredible physical conditioning as a Hashira, and his stubborn refusal to die before making sure everyone else was safe. Inosuke's poison resistance from growing up in the mountains had helped him survive longer than he otherwise would have, but even that natural tolerance had limits. The hole in his chest was still bleeding. The poison was overcoming his body's ability to fight it off. His breathing was becoming shallow and irregular. Without treatment soon, his resistance would fail completely, and the poison would kill him just like it was killing everyone else. Zenitsu had been hit by fewer of Gyutaro's direct attacks than the others, but he had still been exposed to the poison during the fight, and especially during the final explosion. His legs were destroyed from using godlike speed twice. He couldn't move even if he wanted to. Like the others, he was lying in the rubble waiting to die, because there was nothing else he could do. The situation seemed completely hopeless. They had won the fight but were going to die anyway from the aftermath. All their effort, all their sacrifice, all their determination had only delayed their deaths rather than preventing them. Upper Rank 6 was defeated, but the cost was going to be the lives of a Hashira and 3 promising young demon slayers. It would be a victory so costly that it might as well be considered a defeat. That's when Nezuko woke up. She had been unconscious since the early part of the fight, when Tanjiro sang her a lullaby to calm her down after she had transformed into her demon form. Throughout all the chaos, all the desperate battles, and all the near-death moments, she had been sleeping in her box, completely unaware of what was happening to her brother and his friends. But something brought her back to consciousness at this critical moment, and she emerged from the box to see the devastation around her. Nezuko immediately understood that everyone was dying from poison. As a demon, she could sense these things, even if she couldn't speak to explain how she knew. She could also sense that her blood demon art, the special ability unique to her as a demon, could help them. Nezuko's blood had special properties that had been hinted at earlier in the series. She had used her blood demon art once before to burn away the threads that the demon Rui had used to trap people. Her flames could burn demon-related things without harming humans. She went to each person in turn and used her blood demon art on them. Her blood ignited into pink and orange flames that covered their bodies but didn't burn them the way normal fire would. Instead, the flames specifically targeted the poison in their systems and burned it away. The toxins that were killing them were themselves products of demon blood, which meant Nezuko's flames could destroy them just like they had destroyed Rui's threads. The scene was shown mostly through the results rather than in detail. The anime didn't spend a lot of time showing Nezuko going through the process with each person. Instead, it showed her ability, then cut to the aftermath, where Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Tengen were still severely injured, but no longer actively dying from poison. The toxins had been burned out of their systems, giving their bodies a chance to survive and potentially recover over time. This was the first time Nezuko had used her blood demon art to save people by removing poison from their bodies. Previously, she had only used it in combat situations to enhance her attacks or burn through obstacles. Discovering that she could heal people by burning away demon toxins was a major development for her character and would become important in future arcs. It also provided a logical explanation for how the Demon Slayers survived when they absolutely should have died from the poison. However, removing the poison didn't fix all the other injuries. Tengen's hand was still gone. His eyes were still destroyed. Those were permanent physical damages that no amount of burning away poison could heal. Tanjiro's jaw had been pierced completely through. Inosuke's chest had a hole in it. Zenitsu's legs were wrecked. Removing the poison stopped them from dying immediately, but they were all still in terrible condition and would need extensive medical treatment to recover. The cost of victory was staggering when you looked at the full picture. One Hashira had been permanently disabled to the point where he could no longer fight effectively. 3 young demon slayers had sustained injuries that would take months to heal and might leave lasting effects. The entire entertainment district had been destroyed, with countless buildings reduced to rubble. Innocent people who lived and worked in the district had lost their homes and businesses. The economic and human cost of this single battle was enormous. This is what made the Entertainment District arc different from many action anime, where victories feel clean and heroic. The good guys won, yes. The demons were defeated and couldn't hurt anyone else. But winning had required sacrifices that changed lives permanently. The arc never let viewers forget that fighting demons was dangerous, costly, and left scars both physical and mental that didn't just disappear when the battle ended. The decision to show these consequences so clearly was important for the series overall. It established that future battles would carry real risks and real costs. Characters couldn't just bounce back from serious injuries like nothing happened. Defeating powerful demons required sacrifices that would affect the characters for the rest of their lives. This made the stakes feel genuine and made viewers worry about what might happen in future arcs. Nezuko's role in saving everyone also raised interesting questions about her nature as a demon. She was different from other demons in ways that went beyond just not eating humans. Her blood demon art could heal instead of harm. She protected her brother and his friends rather than attacking them. The more the series showed what she could do, the clearer it became that something fundamental was different about Nezuko compared to normal demons. The immediate aftermath of the battle showed all the survivors dealing with their new reality. They had accomplished an incredible feat by defeating Upper Rank 6, but none of them felt particularly victorious lying in the ruins of the Entertainment District with catastrophic injuries. They felt relieved to be alive, grateful that Nezuko saved them, and absolutely exhausted. The emotional tone was survival and relief, rather than triumph and celebration. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. However, while the fight was over and everyone had been saved from the poison, the most important consequence of the battle hadn't revealed itself yet. Tengen's injuries weren't just serious, they were career-ending. And the decision about what that meant for his future as a Hashira would reshape how the series handled the costs of fighting demons. Section 10, the retirement decision, when survival feels like loss. In the previous arc, the Mugen Train story, audiences watched Kyojuro Rengoku die, fighting the upper rank demon Akaza. Rengoku was a Hashira, one of the 9 most elite demon slayers in the entire organization. He was strong, skilled, and dedicated to protecting people. But Akaza was stronger, and despite Rengoku's best efforts and incredible fighting spirit, he died from his injuries after the battle ended. His death was emotional, tragic, and demonstrated just how dangerous upper-rank demons were. Even a Hashira could die fighting them. When the Entertainment District arc began and introduced Tengen as the featured Hashira for this story, many viewers expected the same pattern to repeat. Tengen would fight bravely, show his impressive abilities, and probably die in a heroic sacrifice to save the younger demon slayers. The series had just established that Hashira could die fighting upper ranks. Following up immediately with another Hashira death would reinforce that lesson and show audiences that nobody was safe. It seemed like the obvious direction for the story to go, but that's not what happened. Tengen survived the fight with Gyutaro and Daki. Nezuko's blood demon art burned away the poison that was killing him. Medical treatment from the Demon Slayer Corps helped stabilize his other injuries. He lived through an experience that absolutely should have killed him multiple times over. For viewers who had been dreading another Hashira death, this came as an enormous relief. Tengen made it. He survived. The cost wouldn't be his life. However, surviving didn't mean Tengen could continue his career as a Hashira. His injuries were simply too severe. His left hand had been completely severed during the fight. Unlike in some fantasy stories where lost limbs can be magically regrown or replaced with equally functional prosthetics, Demon Slayer doesn't offer those options. When Tengen lost his hand, it was gone permanently. He would never have it back. Both of his eyes had been destroyed as well. The left eye was slashed during his fight with Gyutaro. The right eye was sacrificed when Tengen let Gyutaro hit him in exchange for pinning the demon down and creating the opening Tanjiro needed. Tengen was completely blind. While blind people can absolutely live full and meaningful lives, being a blind demon slayer who fights monsters in close combat is a completely different situation. Without the ability to see his enemies, Tengen couldn't fight at the level required for a Hashira. The combination of missing a hand and having no vision meant Tengen simply couldn't perform his duties as a Hashira anymore. His sound-breathing techniques required wielding two massive swords connected by a chain. That was impossible with one hand. His musical score technique required observing enemies and reading their patterns. That was impossible while blind. Everything that made Tengen an effective fighter had been taken away by his injuries. He was alive, but his career as an active demon slayer was over. Tengen recognized this reality and made the decision to retire from the Hashira position. This wasn't a choice made lightly or easily. Being a Hashira wasn't just Tengen's job, it was his identity and purpose. After leaving his shinobi clan because he disagreed with their brutal methods, Tengen had found meaning and value in protecting innocent people from demons. He had worked incredibly hard to reach the rank of Hashira, becoming one of only 9 people in the entire organization who achieved that status. Walking away from that meant giving up something that defined who he was. The announcement of his retirement came in the final episode of the Entertainment District arc. Obanai Iguro, the Serpent Hashira, appeared to congratulate Tengen on defeating Upper Rank 6. Obanai had only appeared briefly before in the series, during Tanjiro and Nezuko's trial after they were captured. Now he showed up at the end of the Entertainment District arc to check on the situation and assess what had happened. Obanai's reaction to learning about Tengen's retirement was telling. He pressured Tengen to reconsider, arguing that the Demon Slayer Corps had already lost too many lower-ranking members and couldn't afford to lose a Hashira as well. Obanai pointed out how many regular Demon Slayers had died and questioned why Tengen would choose to retire when the organization needed every strong fighter it could keep. The pressure was real and came from a genuine place of concern about the Corps' ability to fight against Muzan and the remaining upper-rank demons. But Tengen stood firm in his decision. He understood his limitations better than anyone else could. He knew that going into battle against powerful demons while blind and missing a hand wouldn't just make him less effective, it would make him a liability. His slower reaction time and reduced combat ability would endanger anyone fighting alongside him. Rather than risk getting other demon slayers killed because he couldn't keep up anymore, Tengen chose to step away from active combat duty. This decision created a very different emotional impact compared to Rengoku's death. When Rengoku died, it was tragic and sad, but it also felt complete in a way. He had given everything he had, fought to his absolute limit, and died protecting others. His story had a beginning, middle, and end. Viewers could mourn him and remember him as a hero who made the ultimate sacrifice. Tengen's situation was more complicated emotionally. He survived, which was good. Everyone was relieved he didn't die. But he had to live with losing his career and the identity that came with it. He would see other Hashira continuing to fight while he sat on the sidelines unable to contribute. he would know that the skills and strength he had worked his entire life to develop were now useless. In some ways, forced retirement felt sadder than death, because Tengen had to live with the loss rather than being remembered as a hero who died in battle. From a storytelling perspective, having Tengen retire instead of die was a smart decision for several reasons. First, it avoided repetition. The series had just killed a Hashira in the previous arc. Doing it again immediately would make Hashira deaths feel routine and predictable. Each major arc would just be about watching the featured Hashira die heroically. By having Tengen survive but retire, the Entertainment District arc created a different kind of consequence that felt fresh and unexpected. Second, it showed that there were multiple ways for fights to have permanent consequences. Death isn't the only cost of battle. Permanent disability, trauma, and forced career changes are also serious costs that can change someone's life forever. By showing Tengen's retirement, the series expanded the range of possible outcomes for future fights. Audiences now had to worry about characters being permanently injured or disabled, not just killed. Third, letting Tengen live meant he could appear in future arcs as a supporting character, and indeed, he does show up later in the Hashira training arc, where he helps train younger demon slayers and passes on his knowledge and experience. His continued presence in the series allowed his character to grow and develop beyond just being the featured Hashira for one arc. We got to see how he adjusted to retirement, how he found new ways to contribute to the core, and how his relationships with his 3 wives evolved after he stopped active combat duty. The contrast between Rengoku's death and Tengen's retirement also highlighted different philosophies about duty and sacrifice. Rengoku fought until death because he believed protecting others was worth any cost, including his life. Tengen chose to step back when he recognized he couldn't fight effectively anymore, because he believed protecting others meant not endangering them with his reduced capabilities. Both approaches came from a place of wanting to help people, but they resulted in very different outcomes. Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, had a strong reaction to the news of Upper Rank 6's defeat. Despite being severely ill, he expressed joy and pride in what Tengen and the others had accomplished. From Kagaya's perspective, this was the first time in over a century that any demon slayers had successfully killed an upper rank demon. For decades, upper ranks had been considered essentially unbeatable. Hashira would fight them and die without ever managing to kill one. The fact that Tengen's team succeeded meant the tide was potentially turning in humanity's favor. Kagaya also specifically mentioned Tanjiro's potential, noting that the young demon slayer had grown significantly and would continue to become stronger. This was important because it showed that even though Tengen was retiring, the next generation was developing the skills needed to take on upper-rank demons. The future of the Demon Slayer Corps wasn't dependent on any single Hashira staying active forever. New fighters were rising up who could eventually replace those who fell or retired. The retirement also meant that a Hashira position had opened up. The organization maintains exactly 9 Hashira at all times when possible. With Tengen stepping down, that left only 8 active Hashira. Someone would eventually need to be promoted to fill that empty position, assuming any Demon Slayer proved themselves worthy of the rank. This created narrative space for other characters to potentially advance and demonstrated that the organization was dynamic rather than static. For Tengen personally, retirement meant returning to a more normal life with his 3 wives. Throughout the Entertainment District arc, his motivation had been protecting Makio, Suma, and Hinatsuru. They were the people he cared about most in the world. Retirement meant he could focus on them without constantly risking his life on dangerous missions. In that sense, stepping away from being a Hashira wasn't entirely negative. It gave him the chance to build a peaceful life with his family, something he hadn't been able to do while actively fighting demons. The decision to show retirement as a genuine consequence, rather than just a temporary setback, was important for maintaining stakes in the series. If Tengen had somehow recovered his sight and regrown his hand through some plot device, it would have made future injuries feel less permanent and meaningful. By keeping his disabilities and forcing him into retirement, the series demonstrated that some consequences can't be undone. Characters who survive battles might still lose parts of themselves that they can never get back. This realistic approach to handling injuries made the Demon Slayer world feel more dangerous and grounded, despite being a fantasy story about people with superpowers fighting demons. Magic exists in this world through breathing techniques and blood demon arts, but it doesn't solve every problem or erase every consequence. When someone loses a hand, they lose it permanently. When someone goes blind, they stay blind. These limitations made victories feel more costly and losses more meaningful. The Entertainment District arc, ending with Tengen's retirement rather than death, showed that the series was willing to take risks with its storytelling and avoid falling into predictable patterns. It proved that not every featured Hashira would die in their arc. It demonstrated that survival could come with costs almost as heavy as death. And it opened up narrative possibilities for different types of consequences in future fights. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But while the retirement decision mattered for Demon Slayer's story, the fight between Tengen and Gyutaro had impact that reached far beyond just this one anime series. The animation quality, the viewership numbers, and the creative techniques used during this arc changed what the entire anime industry thought was possible for weekly television shows. Section 11. How this fight changed industry standards. For decades, the anime industry operated under a basic acceptable that everyone accepted as fact. Theatrical anime movies would always look better than television anime series. This wasn't a controversial opinion or a debatable point. It was just how things worked, based on simple economics and production realities. Movies had years of production time and budgets measured in millions of dollars. Television episodes had to be produced weekly or monthly, with much smaller budgets and tight deadlines. Obviously, the movies would look better. That's just common sense. Studios made peace with this reality and adjusted their expectations accordingly. Television anime used various tricks to save time and money. Still frames where only the character's mouth moved during dialogue, panning shots across static backgrounds. Fight scenes where the camera cut away right before impact to avoid animating the actual hit. Reusing animation sequences whenever possible. These shortcuts were necessary to meet deadlines and stay within budget. Audiences understood this and accepted that weekly anime would never match the visual quality of theatrical releases. The Entertainment District arc challenged this fundamental assumption and proved it wasn't necessarily true. Yes, theatrical quality animation required more time and resources, but it was possible to bring that level of visual spectacle to weekly television if a studio was willing to organize their production differently and commit fully to quality over quantity. Ufotable demonstrated this with the fight between Tengen and Gyutaro, creating animation that looked as good as theatrical anime films but aired as part of a weekly television series. The key to understanding how Ufotable accomplished this lies in how they structure their production compared to other anime studios. Most large animation studios work on multiple projects simultaneously. They might have 3, 4, 5, or even more different anime series in production at the same time. This approach maximizes the studio's output and revenue potential. More shows mean more chances for hits, more merchandise sales, and more streaming deals. It's a business strategy focused on volume. Studio Mappa is a good example of this multi-project approach. Mappa produces high-quality anime and has worked on beloved series like Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man. But they also take on multiple projects at once, which means spreading their staff and resources across different shows. Sometimes this works out great and all their shows look good. Other times, the quality becomes uneven because some projects get more attention and resources than others. The studio is trying to do too many things at once, and while they succeed more often than not, the sheer volume of work can lead to production issues. Ufotable takes the opposite approach. They focus on 1 or 2 projects at a time and dedicate their full studio resources to making those projects as good as possible. When they committed to producing Demon Slayer, that became their primary focus. Instead of splitting their artists across multiple shows, almost everyone at the studio was working on Demons. This concentration of talent and effort is what allowed them to maintain theatrical quality animation across an entire season of weekly episodes. Another crucial difference is that Ufotable keeps most of their production in-house, rather than outsourcing work to other studios or freelance artists. In the anime industry, outsourcing is common and often necessary to meet deadlines. A studio producing multiple shows simultaneously doesn't have enough staff to do everything themselves, so they farm out certain episodes or scenes to other companies. This can lead to quality inconsistency because different teams have different skill levels and visual styles. By keeping production in-house, Ufotable maintained much tighter control over quality and visual consistency. The same core team of artists worked on the entire Entertainment District arc from beginning to end. They all understood the vision for what the arc should look like. They all knew the techniques being used and the standards they were trying to meet. This created a unified visual style where every episode looked like it came from the same production, rather than being pieced together from different sources. The trade-off for this quality-focused approach is that Ufotable produces fewer total anime series than larger studios. While MAPPA might release 5 or 6 different shows in a year, Ufotable might only release 1 or 2. From a pure business perspective, focused on volume, this seems like leaving money on the table. But the Entertainment District arc proved that focusing on quality could generate enormous returns even with fewer total projects. The viewership numbers, the streaming success, the merchandise sales, and the cultural impact of the Entertainment District arc all demonstrated that audiences would reward shows that delivered exceptional quality. Ufotable wasn't just making good anime. They were making event television that people scheduled their week around watching. That level of audience engagement and loyalty is incredibly valuable, and arguably more profitable in the long run than producing more shows at lower quality. After seeing the success of the Entertainment District arc, other anime studios had to seriously reconsider their own production strategies. The conventional wisdom about what television anime could achieve had been proven wrong. Ufotable showed it was possible to match theatrical quality in weekly episodes if you were willing to commit to it. This forced other studios to ask themselves whether they should continue with the old multi-project approach or try to focus more intensely on fewer shows. Some studios announced they were increasing budgets for their action anime projects after seeing what Ufotable accomplished. Others extended their production schedules to allow more time for animators to work on key sequences. The idea that television anime had to accept lower quality because of time and budget constraints was no longer universally accepted. Studios realized that audiences could tell the difference between good and exceptional animation, and they would show up in huge numbers for shows that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The Entertainment District arc also changed what viewers expected from action anime going forward. After watching the fight between Tengen and Gyutaro animated at that level of quality, audiences were less willing to accept lower standards from other shows. When a new action anime premiered with average animation quality, fans would compare it unfavorably to Demon Slayer and complain that it didn't look as good. The bar had been raised, and every studio producing action anime had to figure out how to meet those new expectations or risk their shows feeling outdated. This shift in expectations wasn't limited to just animation quality either. The Entertainment District arc demonstrated how good fight choreography, effective use of color, dynamic camera movement, and attention to maintaining injury consequences throughout a battle could all contribute to creating memorable action sequences. Other shows that relied purely on flashy effects without thoughtful choreography started to feel shallow by comparison. The entire package of what made a great fight scene had evolved. The fact that the Entertainment District arc episodes were screened in theaters and audiences applauded during the fight sequences proved that the animation had achieved something special. People don't generally applaud during regular television anime screenings. They might clap at the end when the episode is over, or cheer for particularly cool moments. But sustained applause during action sequences, the kind you would get during a theatrical movie premiere, demonstrated that the animation quality had reached that higher tier. These theatrical screenings happened because the demand was there. Fans who had already watched the episodes at home wanted to experience them again on a big screen with proper sound systems. The compilation film, To the Swordsmith Village, that included the final Entertainment District episodes, grossed over $60 million globally. People paid money to watch content they could have seen for free at home because the production quality justified the theatrical experience. For the anime industry as a business, this proved that investing heavily in animation quality could generate revenue beyond just streaming deals and television broadcasts. High-quality anime could be released theatrically and make serious money at the box office. The Mugen Train movie had already demonstrated this by becoming the highest-grossing anime film of all time. The Entertainment District arc confirmed that the success wasn't a one-time fluke, but a repeatable result when the animation quality warranted theatrical treatment. The impact on future Demon Slayer productions was immediate and obvious. The Swordsmith Village arc that followed continued the high animation standards established by the Entertainment District. Then Ufotable announced that the final arc of Demon Slayer, the Infinity Castle story, would be adapted as a trilogy of theatrical films rather than a television series. This decision was made specifically because the studio wanted to maintain and even exceed the animation quality they had achieved in previous arcs, and the theatrical format would give them the time and resources to do so. The Infinity Castle trilogy represents the Entertainment District arc's legacy in concrete form. If that fight hadn't proven that audiences would show up in massive numbers for exceptionally animated Demon Slayer content, the studio might have continued with standard television production. Instead, they committed to the most ambitious and expensive approach possible, banking on the belief that the quality would justify the investment. Early results from the first Infinity Castle film suggest they were right, with the movie breaking multiple box office records in Japan. Beyond Demon Slayer itself, the Entertainment District arc influenced how other anime franchises approach their adaptations. Major action series started getting longer production schedules and bigger budgets. Studios began looking at theatrical releases for key story arcs rather than putting everything on television. The entire industry shifted toward recognizing that quality matters enormously, and that audiences will reward shows that deliver exceptional animation. Animation schools and programs around the world began teaching techniques used in the Entertainment District arc as examples of what modern anime production could achieve. Students studying to become animators analyzed the fight sequences frame by frame to understand how Ufotable blended hand-drawn animation with computer graphics so seamlessly. The arc became a case study in how to do television anime at the highest possible level. Critics who normally focused on movies or live-action television started paying attention to anime after the Entertainment District arc aired. Mainstream media outlets that might have dismissed anime as niche entertainment wrote articles about the technical accomplishments and cultural impact of the Tengen vs. Gyutaro fight. The arc forced broader recognition that anime had evolved into a medium capable of producing work that could compete with any form of visual entertainment in terms of craft and artistry. The Entertainment District arc proved that the ceiling for what television anime could achieve was much higher than anyone had previously thought. It wasn't about what was theoretically possible with unlimited time and infinite budgets. It was about what could actually be done by a well-organized studio willing to commit fully to quality and organize their production around maximizing the visual impact of key sequences. Other studios now had a model to follow if they wanted to attempt similar levels of quality. The fight between Tengen and Gyutaro became the standard that action anime would be measured against for years to come. Whenever a new action series premiered, fans would compare its animation to Demon Slayer's Entertainment District arc. If it came up short, people would ask why the studio couldn't match what Ufotable had accomplished. If it came close or exceeded it, that show would be celebrated as the rare exception that managed to reach or surpass the new standard. Either way, the Entertainment District arc had become the benchmark. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But changing industry standards and impressing animation professionals was only part of the story. The fight's impact extended far beyond the anime industry itself and into broader cultural territory, proving that anime had evolved from niche entertainment into a mainstream phenomenon that could compete with any form of media for audience. Attention. Section 12. The cultural phenomenon. When anime became appointment television. There was a time, not that long ago, when anime was something most people knew existed but didn't really pay attention to. Sure, everyone had heard of shows like Pokemon or Dragon Ball from their childhood. Some people were dedicated anime fans who watched new shows every season and discussed them in online forums. But for the average person who didn't specifically seek out anime, it was just one type of entertainment among many others, not particularly special or noteworthy. The Entertainment District arc changed this equation in ways that went far beyond just being a successful anime. It became the kind of cultural event that people talked about even if they didn't normally watch anime. Coworkers who had never discussed anime before found themselves chatting about the latest episode on Monday mornings. Family members who had different tastes in entertainment were all watching the same show. Social media was flooded with discussion, analysis, clips, and reactions every single week when new episodes dropped. This wasn't just anime fans being excited about a good show. That happens all the time within anime communities. This was different. This was anime breaking out of its dedicated fan base and becoming something that regular people paid attention to because everyone around them was talking about it. The Entertainment District arc made anime appointment television, the kind of show people made sure to watch as soon as it was available because they knew spoilers would be everywhere within hours and they wanted to be part of the conversation. The weekly release schedule played a huge role in creating this cultural moment. Unlike shows that drop entire seasons at once for people to watch at their own pace, the Entertainment District arc released one episode per week every Sunday. This meant everyone was experiencing the story at the same speed. Nobody could binge ahead and spoil what happened in later episodes. The entire audience was on the same page, building anticipation together week by week as the fight against Gyutaro and Daki escalated. This weekly format created a rhythm that people built their schedules around. Fans knew that new episodes dropped Sunday mornings in Japan and would be available on streaming services shortly after, with subtitles for international audiences. Social media would explode with reactions within hours. Spoilers would start circulating by Monday morning. If you wanted to avoid spoilers and be part of the fresh conversation, you needed to watch the episode as soon as possible after it became available. Twitter became particularly important for the Entertainment District arc's cultural impact. Every Sunday when a new episode aired, Demon Slayer-related topics would trend worldwide. Hashtags about the show, character names, and specific moments from episodes would climb to the top of Twitter's trending topics list, competing with news events and sports for visibility. During episode 10, when Tanjiro's Demon Slayer mark awakened and the simultaneous beheading happened, Demon Slayer dominated Twitter trends for the entire day. The Twitter discussion wasn't just anime fans posting in their usual communities either. Regular users who happened to see Demon Slayer trending would click to find out what everyone was talking about. They would see clips from the episode showing the spectacular animation and intense action. Some of them would get curious enough to start watching the series themselves, just to understand what had captured everyone's attention. This word-of-mouth effect through social media helped the show reach audiences it would never have reached through traditional advertising. YouTube played a similar role in spreading awareness and excitement about the Entertainment District arc. Reaction channels that recorded themselves watching episodes and uploaded their responses would get millions of views within days. People enjoyed watching others experience the same shocking moments, emotional beats, and spectacular animation that had impressed them. These reaction videos served as both entertainment and advertising, showing potential new viewers exactly why so many people were excited about Demon Slayer. Some reaction videos would get uploaded within hours of an episode releasing, creating a race among content creators to be first and capture the largest audience. The most popular reaction channels could reliably expect their Demon Slayer videos to be among their highest performing content. This created an entire ecosystem of secondary content built around the show, with analysis videos, theory discussions, and animation breakdowns all contributing to keeping Demon Slayer in the cultural conversation between episodes. TikTok also became flooded with Demon Slayer content during the Entertainment District arc. Short clips from the best animated sequences would circulate widely, often reaching people who had never watched anime before. Editing the footage to music, creating memes, and making comparison videos all contributed to spreading awareness. The algorithm on TikTok meant that popular Demon Slayer content would get pushed to wider and wider audiences, exposing millions of people to the show who might never have encountered it otherwise. Instagram featured endless fan art within hours of each episode airing. Artists would create illustrations of key moments, character portraits, and artistic interpretations of the fight scenes. The visual nature of the Entertainment District arc, with its spectacular animation and striking character designs, made it perfect material for fan artists. These artworks would circulate among people who appreciated the art, even if they hadn't watched the show, serving as another vector for spreading awareness. The spoiler culture that developed around the Entertainment District arc was intense, and demonstrated just how invested audiences were in experiencing the story fresh. People would actively avoid certain websites, mute keywords on social media, and warn their friends not to spoil anything until they had caught up with the latest episode. The fear of being spoiled created urgency around watching episodes quickly, which in turn contributed to the massive viewership numbers as everyone rushed to watch at the same time. This spoiler avoidance behavior is typically associated with major cultural events, like season finales of hit television shows or releases of highly anticipated movies. The fact that a weekly anime series created this same dynamic showed that it had transcended its medium and become a broader cultural phenomenon. People who had never worried about anime spoilers before were suddenly taking precautions to avoid learning what happened in Demon Slayer episodes before they could watch them. The Entertainment District arc also served as a gateway that brought new audiences into anime generally. People who started watching Demon Slayer because everyone was talking about it would often become interested in exploring other anime afterward. They had discovered that anime could deliver entertainment experiences they couldn't get from live-action shows or movies. The unique visual style, the creative freedom in storytelling, and the spectacular action possible through animation opened their eyes to a whole medium they had been ignoring. This gateway effect was particularly strong because Demon Slayer is relatively accessible to newcomers. The story is straightforward and easy to follow. The characters have clear motivations. The action is exciting without requiring deep knowledge of anime tropes or conventions. Someone could jump into Demon Slayer as their first anime and understand everything that was happening without feeling lost or confused. Once they were hooked by Demon Slayer, many viewers would seek out recommendations for other anime to watch, expanding the audience for the entire medium. Academic researchers and cultural critics also started paying serious attention to Demon Slayer during and after the Entertainment District arc. Universities in Japan conducted studies on why the show resonated so strongly with audiences. Marketing professors analyzed how the series built and maintained such intense viewer engagement. Media studies programs examine the show's social media presence and cultural impact. The Entertainment District arc became a legitimate subject of academic study, treated seriously by scholars who recognized it as a significant cultural phenomenon worth understanding. This academic attention was important because it represented mainstream recognition that anime had become culturally significant enough to deserve serious analysis. Previously, anime was often dismissed as children's entertainment, or niche hobby material not worthy of academic study outside of specialized programs. The Entertainment District arc forced broader recognition that anime could be culturally impactful, artistically impressive, and socially significant in ways that warranted serious examination. The show's success also changed conversations in the entertainment industry beyond just anime. Television executives who had ignored anime as a niche market suddenly became interested in the massive audiences these shows could generate. Streaming services that had treated anime as supplementary content realized it could be their biggest draw. Merchandising companies recognized the enormous revenue potential in anime properties that achieved mainstream success. The Entertainment District arc proved that anime wasn't just a specialized market, but a potential goldmine when done right. Perhaps most significantly, the Entertainment District arc demonstrated that anime could compete for attention with traditional primetime television, sports events, and other mainstream entertainment on equal footing. The fact that it beat the Winter Olympics in viewership wasn't just a fun statistic. It was proof that anime had evolved from niche entertainment into a cultural force capable of capturing mainstream attention at the highest levels. This mainstream acceptance showed up in unexpected places. News outlets that normally wouldn't cover anime wrote articles about Demon Slayer's success. Talk shows mentioned the series. Celebrities posted about watching the show. The conversation about Demon Slayer was happening everywhere, not just in dedicated anime spaces. This broad cultural penetration was unprecedented for a Japanese anime series airing primarily to Japanese audiences with international viewers watching subtitled versions. The Entertainment District arc also changed how people thought about animation as a medium. For years, Western audiences tended to view animation as primarily for children, with only a few exceptions like Pixar movies that appealed to all ages. Japanese anime existed as an exception to this rule, but was still seen as niche. The Entertainment District arc helped shift perception by demonstrating that animation could deliver sophisticated storytelling, complex characters, and spectacular action that appealed to adult audiences just as effectively as live-action content. This perception shift mattered because it opened doors for anime to be taken seriously in contexts where it previously would have been dismissed. Anime could be discussed alongside prestige television dramas and high-budget action films, rather than being segregated into its own category. The Entertainment District arc earned a seat at the table where major entertainment properties were discussed and analyzed, representing a significant step forward for anime's cultural status globally. The long-term impact of the Entertainment District arc on anime's cultural position is still developing. The Infinity Castle trilogy being released as theatrical films rather than television episodes shows that the industry recognizes the value of treating major anime properties with the same respect and resources typically reserved for big-budget movies. The mainstream success of subsequent anime like Jujutsu Kaisen and My Hero Academia built on the foundation that Demon Slayer helped establish, proving that the Entertainment District arc's success wasn't an isolated incident, but the beginning of anime's mainstream acceptance. When we look back at the Entertainment District arc years from now, its biggest legacy might not be the spectacular animation or the record-breaking viewership numbers. It might be that this was the moment when anime stopped being niche entertainment and became mainstream cultural content that anyone could enjoy and discuss. The fight between Tengen and Gyutaro didn't just change anime standards. It changed how the world viewed anime as a medium, earning it respect and attention that would open doors for everything that followed. The fight between Tengen Uzui and Gyutaro in Demon Slayer's Entertainment District arc accomplished something that seemed impossible before it happened. It proved that weekly television anime could match theatrical movies in animation quality. It demonstrated that anime could compete with the Olympics for viewership. It showed that forced retirement could feel as impactful as death. And most importantly, it changed what audiences, studios, and the entire entertainment industry believed anime could achieve. Ufutable's revolutionary animation techniques, blending hand-drawn art with computer graphics so seamlessly that viewers couldn't tell where one ended and the other began, set a new standard that every action anime would be measured against. Their decision to focus completely on quality over quantity, keeping production in-house, and dedicating their full studio to one project proved that exceptional animation was possible in weekly episodes if studios were willing to commit to it. The 25.97 million viewers who watched the finale, the records broken, and the cultural conversations that dominated social media all validated this approach and forced the industry to reconsider everything it thought it knew about production limitations. But the technical achievements alone don't explain why this fight resonated so deeply with audiences worldwide. Tenjin's musical score technique brought a completely unique combat system to anime, turning battle into music in ways no other series had attempted. His injuries that stayed with him and ended his career showed that consequences could be permanent and meaningful. Tanjiro's Demon Slayer Mark Awakening introduced a power system with real costs. Zenitsu and Inosuke's impossible survival demonstrated that determination mattered as much as strength. Gyutaro and Daki's tragic backstory reminded viewers that even monsters were once victims. The simultaneous beheading strategy, executed by 4 broken fighters who refused to give up despite their bodies failing, created one of the most memorable action sequences in anime history. And the explosion that nearly killed them all, even in victory, reinforced that winning came with prices that couldn't be ignored or erased. The Entertainment District arc didn't just entertain millions or break records. It forced mainstream culture to recognize anime as a legitimate art form, capable of competing with any entertainment medium. It proved that animation could tell sophisticated stories with real emotional weight. It demonstrated that audiences would show up in enormous numbers for content that delivered on its promises. When anime beat the Olympics, it wasn't just Demon Slayer winning. It was the entire medium earning respect, attention, and recognition it had been denied for decades. That's why this fight changed anime forever. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.